I'd love to introduce you to Patricia Galloway. So Patricia is a well-respected and influential board-level leader with a career that's seen her partnering SME boards in the banking, technology and engineering sectors, helping them to grow their performance and profit through their people. So Patricia is here today to share her thoughts on how to approach a changing career, especially as you're leaving the military, and the steps to make it a success. So Patricia, thanks for joining us today. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Esme, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning, everyone. I will share some practical guidance that I have seen prove very successful for career transitions. My father-in-law was ex-military. He served in the parachute regiment, and he went on to have many different careers outside of the military and was very successful in all of them. I was always struck by his incredible sense of team and the support that he brought to everyone who worked with him in every role that he had. I was also struck by his moustache, not physically, fortunately, but my children still refer to him as Grandad Moustache. As an industrious and helpful individual, he would have relished the opportunity to help others make the transition that you are currently facing. As an HR specialist who has worked extensively in transition and business evolution in all of my roles, I'm also excited about helping you to make this transition. I have changed industry a number of times during my career in HR, working in industrial engineering, tech, consulting, and finally now in banking. To a certain degree, each of those roles required me to reinvent myself. Reinvent what I did, what I knew, and even the very language I used. Throughout this process, I discovered that although the language and words may be different, the systems and processes tend to be very similar. Of course, we have been through a difficult time with the coronavirus pandemic, but there are very promising indications for the job market and generally a positive feeling of a return to growth across the city. Recruiters have reported that permanent hiring activity reached a 6-year high in March, and the latest labour survey by KPMG showed that month-on-month growth in permanent placements was the highest since April 2015, and demand for temporary staff rose at the fastest rate since November 2017. So it's a good time to be looking for your next role. In terms of finding a role in the city, numerous firms have signed up to the UK Armed Forces Corporate Covenant, which shows how eager city firms are to hire ex-military personnel. Many of these firms have military transition programs. So this is a great place to start, and we'll come on to this in more detail later. But finding a role in the business world is a job in itself. You will succeed, and eventually you will find a role that is right for you. How quickly that happens depends most on your ability to understand yourself as a productive asset that can bring success to the eventual team you will join. The first step in finding a new role is to look out across the business landscape and decide which mountain to climb, understanding the opportunities that lie before you. Where you choose to go in business is primarily driven by who you are and what you can do. So, who are you? You're a brand. How do we determine that brand? Well, I'd like to introduce you to a very simple system known as the SKIN method. What does this mean? Skill set, knowledge, image, and name. Those 4 factors make up your conveyance. They determine how you are perceived by others. Your skill set, what can you do that others can't? Can you lead? Can you manage complex projects? Can you speak? Can you motivate others around you? Can you see the tiny details that others might miss? Knowledge. Do you know things others don't know? Are you an expert in something? Do you understand how to create a strategy that will succeed? Do you know what is needed to see it through to execution? Do you know what is needed to make a process function? To make many assets work as one machine? Your image. What is your look? What clothes do you wear? How formally do you dress? Are you a traditionalist? Are you uber modern? How do you hold your body? Do you welcome those around you with warm, open arms? Or do you politely nod and shake their hand? These behaviors determine your image. And the language we use. Do we feel it would be a good idea because it stems from the heart, or do we think it would be a good idea? There is no right or wrong, but look carefully at your behaviors, your physicality, and your attire, and ask yourself how much of this is deliberate and how much of it is habit. And finally, name. How well known are you in your current or future environment? Don't be scared to reach out to people, ever. People will not think you're behaving in a Machiavellian or sinister way simply because you want to work with them or their organization. People in business are generally kind, and trust me, you may be thinking, what can they do for you? But they're quite likely also thinking, what can you do for them? It's a fair exchange and it seeks mutual benefit. Expand your network, ardently, but with a smile. And above all, be authentic to who you are. Trying to be someone else is hard and it will likely appear false. The skin method is a simple system and it's worth an hour or two of your time to carefully consider your strengths in each of these areas. The brand you discover, your personal brand, who you are, what you do, how you behave, who you know, these things will help you choose which mountain to climb. So you've chosen your mountain, your sector, your role, and possibly even your company. But before we climb, we must train. This is the foundation for everything else to build on. As a recent or forthcoming event, your reasons for leaving the military will be at the forefront of your mind. But you must now focus not on the reasons for leaving, but on what you want going forward. And for many of you, this will be the same thing. So let's consider a very simple Venn diagram. This circle represents why you joined the military. Maybe it was a sense of duty, sense of purpose or belonging, adventure and travel, to develop skills, excitement, challenge, training, or to be part of a team. This circle represents all of that. The next overlapping circle represents what you did in the military. You may have held many roles. Consider the skills you developed, what you learned, the expertise you gained. Did you make decisions under pressure? Did you lead? Were you responsible for management? Did you plan for contingencies? Did you work in logistics? Were you responsible for strategy? Maybe you developed skills that lead directly into a civilian role, such as engineering, IT, or surveying. Our third circle contains your reasons for leaving. Did you want something the military could not provide? Perhaps more stability, a more static lifestyle, greater financial reward, the acquisition of specific skills that maybe weren't available in the military. As with any Venn diagram, the magic is in the middle, this area here. This area represents your considered approach. It represents a balance of your needs, abilities, and ambitions. In its simplest form, we could call this area your curriculum vitae. But in a higher consideration, it represents something that must be fulfilled, not only for you to find success, but for you to also feel fulfilled. And those two bed partners, success and fulfillment, rarely step out alone. So, shall we begin our expedition at base camp? This is our first approach towards the summit, and indeed represents your first approach to your potential employer. In recent years, the business world and how we communicate with each other has evolved exponentially. But do not underestimate the importance of the age-old, tried and tested, well-written, thoughtfully composed curriculum vitae. Recruiters will skim through CVs, so you need to stand out. And to do this, you need to use the language they understand and the keywords they are looking for. You can use the military term for what you did and your title, but then have a civilian version of that as well. For example, platoon leader could be leadership responsibility for 20 to 50 people. The mistake I see people make is to use a one-size-fits-all approach to their CV. Let me be clear. Your CV is specific to the role you are pursuing. Indeed, it is specific to the company and to the very job description they wrote. Try to match their language and try to sell yourself according to their needs. But be mindful that your CV forms the basis of the questions they will ask you in interview. For each claim that you make, such as having strong leadership skills or organizational abilities, ensure you have an example you can share in your interview. Some firms unfortunately leave the CV selection process to a machine. The computer will scan your CV for keywords. But these words are not secrets. They are laid out like breadcrumbs in the job description. Let's take a look at an ideal CV. It has a summary at the top, a few lines highlighting key skills and achievements, in civilian speak, of course. Be concise, no longer than 2 pages. Outline your positions held, responsibilities, and key achievements. And use data where possible. It gives some depth to your experience. The STAR model is a good way to provide solid examples for the skills you mention. The STAR model is the situation, task, action, and result. Build this into short key points, including how you achieve the result and how your actions address the initial situation or task. Have another person you trust look through your CV. In fact, use all of the resources you have available through the Officers Association. Most civilians simply don't have anything like that level of support available to them, so do use that. Finally, and crucially, your CV must include a cover letter. All we have talked about applies. It should be specific to the organization and the role you're pursuing. However, it's also an opportunity for you to communicate your personality. Now, whilst it's probably not a place for jokes, it should convey your passion, ambition, and warmth. So that's your CV and cover letter. Now let's briefly look at LinkedIn. A few years back, the word LinkedIn struck fear into the hearts of recruiters, and now it is one of the most valuable tools at their disposal. Simply put, LinkedIn is how recruiters find you. And we could spend an entire session on LinkedIn alone. And there is lots of support and tutorials out there on the internet for you to learn how to use it if it's new to you. So I'm just going to cover a few key points. Your profile picture. Have a non-military picture. You're not in your uniform. You're not applying for a military job. You're applying for a civilian job. So you need to look like you would in a civilian role. LinkedIn will use your job title at the top unless you change it. It's preferable to have a few strong words that summarize you. Have a clear summary. Who are you? What drives you? And your expertise. Similar to your CV, but not in the same level of detail, outline your work experience and achievements. Then start networking. I will come on to this in more detail, but you can start by following companies you would like to work for. Ensure that your career interests, it's a section, is under the settings section in your profile. It's a small but easily missed box, which says, let recruiters know you're open. Turn it on. That's how recruiters will be able to know that you're open to your next opportunity. Now beware, with this, it can also open the floodgates to quite a few spam messages from some would-be recruiters. So you need to use your own judgment to sort through some of the wheat from the chaff. LinkedIn works on algorithms, and the more you use LinkedIn and the more active you are on it, the higher your profile will rise in others' searches. You can increase your activity to start with simply by just liking what others have posted that's relevant to your interests. And then you can move on to commenting on others' posts, even post something small yourself, and then finally start making and sharing your own posts. Recommend and endorse others on their profiles. It's a sort of LinkedIn etiquette that they reciprocate. But of course, do keep this to people you genuinely know. And my final point on LinkedIn is to avoid sharing your political views on social media, not just LinkedIn, but any social media. All recruiters will search for you, and you don't want them to find anything that will not work in your favor. So we've made it to base camp 2. And I'm going to focus a little bit more now on networking and how you can build your network. There's a lot of competition for jobs, so it's important to use your network to help you. And it's not just your network, as in the people that you know, but it's your unknown network, so who they know. So how do you build your network? Well, I've got a few pointers. Firstly, I would start by researching people who have a military background and are in the profession that you would like to move into, and then connect with them on LinkedIn. Just send a note saying when you're connecting with someone, simply saying that you're planning to leave the military and you're interested in their industry or organization and you'd like to connect. It's always good if you can just send a little note when you're connecting with somebody that you don't know. On LinkedIn, follow companies you're interested in joining. And once your CV is in good shape, start reaching out to recruiters. Even before you're ready to move, just to start building relationships with them so that you're on their list. Now, recruiters are very busy and they may not follow up with you as much as you would like them to, but that is exactly the same for everyone. So do not take it personally and don't be put off. You will need to nudge them. Many organizations, particularly large firms, already have the infrastructure in place for recruiting ex-military personnel. Many of these refer to this as their military transition program. Although there are various names used for this, of course, Google will help you find them. But don't be afraid to contact firms directly and ask if they have a military transition program. Anybody in their HR department should be able to help you with that. Having been in the armed forces, there is a fair chance that you have some sort of security clearance. This can be an enormous asset that sets you apart from the general public. It can open doors into jobs in government, international governments, working with firms that handle sensitive information. So ensure you know what your security clearance is and when it expires, and then use that period to your clear advantage. Just to be clear, this is a heavily sought after aspect, as it's far easier for organizations to renew your clearance than to apply for it from scratch. The website, securityclearedjobs.com, is one of a few sites that lists these jobs. Finally, when using an external site or organization to aid the transition of your career, avoid those that ask for money upfront. Reputable recruiters take their fee from the employer and not from you. So you've done your reflection, created your CV and LinkedIn profile, you're active on LinkedIn, you've been networking, and this effort has led to an interview. This is the next point of preparation. When preparing for interviews, you need to pull out each part of your CV and LinkedIn profile and anything you have stated you did and build a story around that, which you can discuss in interviews and use to provide answers to questions. To do this, I recommend what's called the SMART approach to preparing your stories. S stands for situation. Start by outlining the situation behind your story. Sorry, Victoria, would you mind to just move on to the next slide? I think we might be the one after that as well. Yeah, thank you. S stands for situation. So start by outlining the situation behind your story. M stands for metrics or more. The second part gives you the opportunity to expand your story with concrete details and scope, including any obstacles, conflicts, or difficulties you encountered. A stands for action, so list the specific actions you took. R stands for results, describe the exact results you achieved. Quantifiable results that use data are always more effective and more memorable. And finally, T stands for tie-in, the final stage that brings the message home that you are the ideal candidate for the position by tying your accomplishments directly to the needs of your future employer. Once you've built your stories, you will feel much more confident going into interviews. But remember, interviewing is a two-way street, and it should be a discussion. It's a meeting between two professionals. You have a huge amount to bring to any organization. But if you're not successful in a particular pursuit or a particular role in a particular company, then it just wasn't meant to be. Smile and move on, because the right role is just around the corner for you. So I'm going to conclude here, as I'm aware that there are lots of other speakers today who have a lot to tell you. But please remember, you aren't moving away from anything, but towards something new and exciting. And as a final thought, I would like to offer you two quotes. The first by the great Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survive. It is the one most adaptable to change. And by leaving the military, your circumstances will change substantially, and it's critical that you adapt to that change. But more importantly still, we turn to the wisdom of the brilliant Oscar Wilde. Be yourself, for everyone else is taken. I wish you every success on this exciting journey that lies ahead. You carry experiences and skills that others will never have, and with them, you will enrich the business world, a business world which stands before you with open arms. Thank you for your time.
That was absolutely excellent. Thank you, Patricia, and such positive quotes to end on. If you're happy, we have time just for one single question.
Yes,
and it's
of
one
course.
that came up before the event, actually, and I wondered whether you could list maybe 2 or 3 of the key skills that you see financial services firms actively looking for.
There's a huge crossover with the skills that I think that come from our being in the military, but resilience is a big one. I mean, there's huge conversations around resilience today and being able to demonstrate that. And I think also leadership skills, somebody who can show that they have led and that you can endure volatility. So the markets have been very volatile. Our work has been very volatile through the pandemic. So I think showing that level of resilience and leadership through your time in the military and transferring that into work in the city is hugely beneficial.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thanks again for joining us and for another fantastic presentation. Are you able to stay on, or are you shooting off straight away?
I'm going to stay on for a little while, and then I'll try and join a bit later if I can. But if I can be of any support to anyone, then do feel free to reach out either to me or to Esme.
Thanks, Patricia. So next up, we have Hattie, who left the Army in 2018, having served for 10 years as an officer in the Intelligence Corps. So Hattie now works for EY's People Consulting practice, specialising in the delivery of large-scale transformation and innovation programmes for public sector clients. Thanks, Hattie. I will hand straight over to you.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. It's really lovely to be speaking today. I have to say up front, I'm so pleased to be supporting this because I myself did lots of OA events when I was leaving the Army, really not all that long ago, only 3 years ago, and I found them to be so helpful. So I really hope that for those of you attending today, you do take quite a lot of value for this, and certainly that was my experience of these sorts of events when I was coming to do my own resettlement. So I'll give you a little bit of my background up front. So I left the Army in 2018, which feels all at the same time like it was about 1 million years ago, but also like it was just yesterday. But including my time at Sandhurst, I was in the Army for just under 10 years. I went to Sandhurst in 2009, fresh out of uni, so naive back then, and I knew I always wanted to go into military intelligence. It's absolutely what I wanted to do, and it certainly didn't disappoint. I feel very fortunate to have had the career that I did in the Intelligence Corps, and I did what you would probably call the sort of the pure operational intelligence jobs. So I had various really interesting deployments, obviously Afghanistan, but also Mali in West Africa, the Ukraine, some sort of short-term deployments in the Middle East and also to Tunisia in 2015. For those of you who might remember, there was an attack on the beach in Sousse, a terrorist attack in 2015, so I went out there after that. So arguably that's probably one of the most interesting. But in all my roles, apart from my final role, which I left from, which was as an adjutant, I was working for senior stakeholders to inform operational planning and or decision making, including in the joint environment and also in the government arena. So in Tunisia, for example, the team I was working for were reporting directly into Philip Hammond in his role as Foreign Secretary. So what I'm not going to do is labour on my military career, because I get it, that's absolutely not why you're here. But I wanted to mention some of those jobs because in many ways they're very similar to the role of a consultant. So I actually used to joke that I was effectively a consultant within the army in terms of the roles that I was given. And by that, I mean, I was pulled in often at very short notice to rapidly assimilate and analyse often huge swathes of fairly complex information, distill that down and kind of work out what the main salient headline points were, but also the key conclusions and recommendations, and then present that in a digestible format to senior decision makers to enable them to address complex problems. In a nutshell, that's consulting. Clearly, the context is very different. The methodologies and tools that we use are different, but ultimately it's consulting. And that was quite relevant with regards to my own narrative when I was looking at consulting as a second career. I know Patricia earlier was talking about brand. That's highly relevant in consulting. So for those of you who are thinking about it as a second career, I'll talk a bit more throughout this, or I'll keep talking about the importance of narrative. So that's why I wanted to mention that up front. So I decided to leave the army in 2018, as I've said, and people often ask me why, which is obviously a great question. But for me, it just felt like a really natural jumping off point. So for those, I mean, clearly for this audience who are familiar with the way the armed forces work, it wasn't, do I go this year or do I go next year? It was, do I go this year or do I go perhaps in 5, 6, 7 years time? And the point just before I was eligible to promote to major felt like a really good jumping off point for me. But the other challenge that I had in the army, and I think this is probably fairly relevant to the context of today's session, is that when I looked up, and I mean really looked up, to the senior echelons, there was no one who I genuinely felt presented a real role model for me and for my career. So by that I mean for me as a woman, but also for me as a person who's in the intelligence corps, regardless of gender. Now, I'm fairly ambitious. I'm prepared to work extremely hard. When I look up, I need to see role models that are relevant to me and to the career that I want to have. So certainly that was lacking for me in the army, but also it was lacking in a number of organisations that I looked at when I was coming to leave. It's not something that I find is lacking at EY. And I want to mention that today because I'm conscious of the context of the Women into the City sort of sessions. So with regards to my route into consulting, as I've mentioned, it sort of felt like a natural choice after the roles that I'd had within the Corps. But let me be really clear, saying you want to be a consultant is a bit like saying you want to go into the army. Clearly, you have to narrow that down a bit, and I had to narrow that down a bit. So I would say for those of you who are still thinking about consulting at the macro level, there are two fundamental things to think about. One is the nature of the work, i.e., what kind of work is it that you want to do and what kind of clients do you want to do it for? And the second is, what kind of consultancy is it that you want to work for? And in a really simplistic way, you could probably break that down into sort of boutique, niche, really specialist or big. But rest assured, in a big firm, you will nonetheless still specialise because they are fairly compartmentalised by their nature. So I'll start with the work that I wanted to do. So having been an adjutant and also having lived through what I would call the sort of delivery end of major workforce change under Army 2020, I was very drawn towards workforce advisory, specifically sort of workforce transformation. And I was also very clear from the word go that I wanted to work in public sector, government and public sector. What I'll do, I'll describe my role in a bit more detail after I tell you why I chose EY. So I looked across the piece at boutiques and sort of the bigger firms. But for me, the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning is the scale and breadth that you get within the big four and also the strategic three. it's so exciting. So we've got huge clients, global in scale, you know, we've got global reach. We've got the capacity to pretty much deliver anything. It's what's really empowering is if the opportunity is right and the client is right and the market is right, the moment is right, there's not really any such word as no at EY, which, you know, or across the Big Four, which is really, really cool. Now, I get it, that's a very personal thing, and I can absolutely understand the appeal of a boutique or a much smaller firm or something a bit more specialist. That is a very individual choice, and that's something for those of you thinking about consulting, you need to do that soul searching for yourselves. But within the Big Four, for me, EY was a natural first choice. So I was very fortunate, actually. I had a few offers to play with. But for anyone familiar with EY, its sort of purpose is building a better working world, which I know sounds incredibly cheesy. But everybody I met there when I was having my conversations and doing my networking and doing my research genuinely seemed to live and breathe that, which I was really inspired by. And I can tell you, having worked there for 3 years, everybody does live and breathe that purpose, and it's something that we take into account when we're bidding for fresh work, when we're considering work that we might take on, and also when we're promoting people. You know, it just for me, I wanted to go into an environment where I at least felt that the work I was doing was purposeful. Having come out of the armed forces, that was something that was very important to me, and I liked the fact that EY talk about this at every level. They also, you know, they sort of position themselves as people-centric. They're a strong employer. They're recognised for being a strong employer for women and for example, the LGBTQ+ community. You know, they're making strong inroads to be as diverse as they can be. And obviously, I can't talk for every bit of the firm, but in terms of the bit of the organisation that I work for, I can definitely tell you on the basis of 3 years there that they walk the walk. It's, you know, culturally, I really enjoy working in that organisation. But in terms of, I'll talk to you a bit about my current role in more detail, and then I'll talk about routes into consulting slightly more generally. So in terms of my role, so for background, EY's consulting practice is split into 3 major service lines. We've got business consulting, technology consulting, and people consulting. I sit within the people consulting bit of the business in workforce advisory. And interestingly, actually, our head of workforce advisory for UK and I is an ex-rifleman. He was a major in the Rifles, and he heads up our military network as well. He's awesome. But within workforce advisory, you have sort of the major specialisms are change, communications, HR transformation, talent management, D&I, learning and leadership, and workforce analytics. I sit within the change bit, or the sub-service line of change. And what do? I help deliver big change for public sector clients. So if you think of workforce transformation as sort of major change with people at the centre of it, so dealing with all of the things that affect the workforce. For example, the workforce might be completely restructuring, a la Army 2020. It might be being hugely reduced in size with all the associated remodelling that needs to happen. It might be being expanded and grown. If you're landing a major new piece of technology, what training do people need, perhaps on a global scale? How do we deliver that? How do we perhaps deliver it across multiple different languages all at the same time? Perhaps we're automating an area of a business with all the resulting impacts on the residual workforce that entails. What's the talent management framework within a business? Does that need to change and evolve over time in order to attract and retain the best talent? How do we track readiness, adoption, and all of the things that come with major, for example, tech-enabled transformation? You know, it's a huge, really varied, really interesting part of consulting. Obviously, I'm biased, but to give you a really tangible example for those of you who are sitting there thinking, oh, crikey, this just sounds like consulting buzzwords, I would assume that most of the people on the call have read the recent defence review and the integrated review that's taking place, that pans out what's going to take place across government. There's a whole series of things that are listed in that, which are basically major workforce transformation, and certainly things like HR transformation are going to form a big part of it. You know, for example, when the Army is talking about a better utilising reserves, or having more integrated or more blended working models, modernising its people programme, all of that stuff would fit within workforce advisory. So it's a really cool area of consulting because it's incredibly broad and very people-centric. It's also a booming area because so many organizations are now coming to restructure or change their models on the back of COVID. You know, there's huge work that's now ongoing in some of the biggest companies in the world on the back of the pandemic. Very brief example, HSBC are getting rid of 40% of their infrastructure and they are moving to a hybrid working model. You know, there's a ton of work that's going to be going on in that space to enable that to happen. So in just finally, in terms of the work that I myself do, I'm what you'd call a delivery specialist, which means I actually sort of see through change in its entirety. So the point at which I really kind of get engaged is where you're effectively translating a strategy into meaningful execution. So what I don't do, and you will talk, you know, for those of you looking at consulting, you will talk to consultants who do sort of 6-week pieces of work. They might come in and do a diagnostic and issue recommendations, you know, whatever their sort of specialism is. I am generally engaged with, or I am engaged with very long-term, kind of complex end-to-end transformation programs. That's what floats my boat. Doesn't necessarily float everybody's, but it gives you an indication of, you know, the different kind of options that you would have to shape your career within consulting. You know, there's not one sort of tried and tested, there's not one cookie cutter model that fits. So what I'd like to do now is talk about routes into consulting more broadly. Obviously, I've kind of given you my own personal journey. But for those of you who are interested in breaking into consulting, how on earth do you navigate your way into the sector? So I would say this is my sort of my upfront top tips. You need to be really clear upfront on what your personal narrative is with regards to why you want to do this and why you think you'd be a good fit. And it comes back to Patricia's point earlier around brand. That's fundamental because in every conversation you have, you really need to be selling that to people. You then need to have as many conversations as you can to shape exactly where it is that you can pitch yourself. Now that might be you learn a bit more from your conversations about exactly what's out there, and that shapes your understanding about where you want to pitch yourself. But it could also be in your conversations, people are saying to you, do you know what? These are the skill sets that you've referenced for yourself. I think you'd be a really good fit for this particular specialism, and we're actually hiring in that area at the moment. So I'll put you in touch with somebody who you know might be able to progress that for you. So you might just develop an understanding of what openings there are. But these conversations are so key to actually landing a role. Clearly, I'm only speaking for EY here. I'd be interested to hear what the other ladies who are speaking from consultancies today have got to say. But I've never spoken to anyone in EY in 3 years who's come in as an experienced hire, having applied blind to a role. It's always recommendation based in the outset, and consultancies are always looking for fresh talent and using their existing workforce to get fresh people in. And that's generally how you kind of get one foot in the door into the recruitment process. So networking is so fundamentally important, and military networks are fantastic for that. You all have the major advantage that you have got an affiliation with the military, and you can use the military networks, which you know are full of people who genuinely want to help. So please do use that, but please do be respectful of that. I speak to an awful lot of people who are interested in coming into consulting, and I'm always happy to help. But it doesn't really help me if you just tell me you want to be a consultant. I've not given any thought to what that actually might mean. It also doesn't help me if you know, I'm not going to say thank you, for example, if I put you in touch with somebody who is more senior or more influential and might be able to help you. Just please be respectful of the networks. They're there to help, and you've got the massive advantage of being engaged with the military communities, but just do be conscious that people's reputations are obviously crucial within the organisations that they're working in. So just on that note about military networks, I wanted to touch on the kind of opportunities, or I often get asked what kind of opportunities might be a good fit for veterans. So what I would say is consulting in a nutshell is about 2 things: selling new work to clients and being able to deliver top quality service to clients. And those 2 things go hand in hand. Now that means when somebody is speaking with you, they're thinking about how they can sell you to a client as part of an engagement team, how you can deliver good work for their clients, but also how you might help them sell work. So think really carefully about the narrative it is that you bring. There isn't necessarily one cookie cutter answer for every veteran, because everybody's background is going to be different. So for example, if you've come from the loggies, you might have, you know, some really strong insights around supply chain and operations. That's going to be completely different to someone who's come out of education training services. So just think really seriously about what your narrative is and where you think that kind of lends itself in terms of the specialisms that you might have. Personally, I always think change management is a strong area for veterans. You know, generally we're fairly adaptable, we're not easily phased, we're good managers of people, we're hardworking, and we've often worked for some fairly exacting people. All of those things are really relevant. And if you're going into organisations to land big change, being a strong leader really helps. So don't be afraid to sell those skills. They're all incredibly relevant. But what I can't really do is give you one specific area that I think would be a good fit. It's so dependent on what your own personal background is. So finally, I'm conscious I'm sort of coming towards the end now of my time, but I wanted to briefly touch on this, and I'm sure this will be something that we probably talk about a little bit more in the panel Q&A. I'm conscious of the context of today, you know, women in the city, and I know there have been questions in advance of this around navigating flexi working, getting the right work-life balance, progressing your civilian career with all of those things in mind. So what I just wanted to kind of mention at the end of my talk is, I've obviously said to you that I really needed to see evidence of female leadership when I was kind of choosing my sector, but also more specifically the organisation that I wanted to go into. I also became a mother 11 months ago, so I had a little boy, and I now have a baby, which was never something I had sort of planned on doing. So this has been a real kind of eye-opener for me in terms of the impact of that. But now it's fundamental for me to see evidence of working parents also reflected at the top of an organisation. So working parents being enabled so they can smash it both at home and at work. So I would say to anyone who's thinking about all of those kind of things when they're coming to, leave the armed forces, please be realistic about the sector that you're going into, but be really honest with yourselves about what you want your life or your working week to actually look like. So I've just had a baby, as I've said, and I've genuinely had so much support from senior women at EY who are genuinely role modelling how to make the balance work. You know, they might be partners, they're working full time, but they've also got a family and they don't feel they're failing in that department. I am so grateful for that. And I can tell you from speaking to female colleagues in other organisations that that doesn't necessarily exist everywhere. So I think you have to be really, really honest with yourself about what it is that you want, and then target an industry, but more specifically, probably an organisation or an employer who you can see is going to meet some of those needs for you. If you have specific needs, for example, around, I mean, inevitably this conversation often comes back to parenthood, but it's not just about parenthood, it's about what your life priorities are and how you want to see your career looking like in, a number of years' time. It's really important to go to an environment where you can see examples of that having been met, those needs being met for people who are like you. I hope we'll probably touch on this more in the Q&A panel. I'm sure it's something that's at the forefront of many people's minds. I'm conscious I'm slightly over time now, I think. So I'm going to halt it there. And I look forward to carrying on the discussion in the Q&A. And as Patricia said, if anybody would like to reach out to me personally, the best way to get hold of me is via LinkedIn. I'm very active on there, and I do endeavour to respond to messages as quickly as I can.
Thank you, Hattie. You'll probably see in the chat there's been a flood of questions, but I think it's best if we save those for the Q&A panel at the end. As you say, I'm sure other speakers would like to share their insights as well. But sure. Thank you. So next up, we have Kelly Mullane. So Kelly is the new business consultant for Northern Trust. So Kelly is a former Army captain and has civilian experience within Barclays, Goldman, and now Northern Trust. Kelly, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to hand straight over to you. Thank you for joining us.
No problem at all. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me.
Yes, brilliant.
Excellent, wonderful. Okay. So first of all, apologies for not being able to get to you on time. That's the joys of a client-facing role when you're in a client meeting and they're talking about what they need out of your firm and you're scribbling notes down and trying to get away from them as quickly as you can. So apologies for that. I guess what I wanted to do is give you a bit of an update from, or a bit of an overview really, from my perspective. I'm probably one of the first of the panel to leave the army. I left back in 2007, and I've been in the city now for nearly 14, 15 years. So it's been an interesting time for me since leaving the army, but I've never really left it behind. And I think that's one thing that I'm quite proud of, really. And everyone, in fact, still knows me in my firm as Captain Kelly, which I get a lot of stick for, you can imagine, certainly off the other ex-military colleagues I've got. So a bit of a quick background on me. I'm 43 years old, white British woman of Scottish, Irish, and Italian descent. I'm a wife and I'm a mum to two beautiful children. I like to think that I'm now a former British Army officer, but a female leader in the finance industry. So my background includes growing up in Devon and Leicestershire. I got a pilot's license through the RAF at the age of 17, and then an RAF bursary to go to Exeter University. I transferred to the Army, however, late in my university degree, and then a nearly 8-year career in the Army, starting obviously at Sandhurst and then attaining the rank of captain, operational tours to Iraq. I was an Arabic speaker, an Arabic instructor, and I was an interpreter, military interpreter, throughout most of my operational tours. So I left the Army in 2007 and took a chance at another career. I didn't know what it was I wanted to do when I left the Army. All I knew was I thought I could probably leverage some of my skills. And remember, this is back in 2007. There wasn't the opportunity to go into veterans networks or the huge amounts of initiatives there are in the city nowadays. This was pretty much in the early days of veterans being recognised as a talent pool. I put my CV on a number of websites, including efinancialcareers.com, and I was looking at kind of project management roles, but potentially looking at roles that would allow me to use my Arabic language skills as well. I got a phone call one day from a retired infantry major who had set up a consultancy. His role was basically getting ex-army, ex-military personnel into the city. And he called me one day and he said, "Kelly, would you be interested in a job in the city?" And my response to him was, "Which city?" Because I had no idea what he was talking about. That just shows how inexperienced I was in any of the whole city idea and the whole financial environment. But I did manage to get a role through him, and I found myself at Barclays Capital as was, which was the investment banking side of Barclays. Pretty steep learning curve, and another opportunity then came about at Goldman Sachs. So at Barclays, I was focused on project management. We were building out new entities, and they were using my Arabic language skills to help with the setup of the operational part of Barclays Investment Bank for Barclays Saudi Arabia. So it was interesting. I got to use my Arabic language skills a little bit there. But then obviously, you can't stay still in your career. And I think it was after about 2.5, 3 years, I started getting that, okay, I'm ready for a new challenge now. And I think this comes from my military background. Every 2 or 3 years, you're kind of ready to move on and do something else. So I got an opportunity at Goldman Sachs and I jumped at it because if that's one name in the finance world that you want on your CV, it's Goldman. That was an interesting couple of years. Again, I was very much in the project management space, looking at regulatory programs this time. But during that time as well, I also got married to the yin to my yang, and our daughter Imogen followed soon after that. And it was at that point where I decided a 75, 80-hour week at Goldman Sachs was not conducive to having children. So I actually left Goldman after having Imi and looked for another role that would allow me to potentially balance that whole, work and parenthood. Didn't really find the right role and was actually at that time based down in Exeter. So didn't really feel that I was able to do everything I wanted to do with my career. Still felt that I was able to add value, but really couldn't find the right role. So we ended up coming back up to London, and I was very excited to accept a role at Northern Trust. So Northern Trust is an asset servicing, asset management. It's really what the finance world calls the back office, in terms of we support pension funds, you know, and we do all of their custody, safekeeping, fund administration, and other ancillary services for them. I got a role in their product development team as the lead of their UK team, looking at regulatory projects and programs. So it was kind of linked to what I'd already done in my past lives at Goldman and Barclays. But it was great. At that point, I was given the opportunity to lead a team of 14 blokes, actually, which was brilliant, and you know, gave me an opportunity to kind of, you know, use all those skills that I had learned during my military career around, you know, team building, you know, leadership, and but also leveraging everything I'd learned at Barclays and Goldman in terms of regulation and project management and all the rest of it. I then very quickly decided that the role was fantastic, but I was ready for a new challenge. I'd done project management for quite some time, and I kind of thought, well, there must be something else that I can do within finance. And I was very pleased to accept a role in the sales team. So I effectively now sell Northern Trust to pension funds, big, large institutional and corporate investors. It's a fantastic space, incredibly busy, incredibly tough. It's not all about entertaining clients and taking them out for dinner, certainly not at the moment. And it's quite pressurized role. But it really is in the sales team that I think I've found my home again. And, you know, I am a deal manager, so it means I manage the most complex global strategic deals that Northern Trust are taking on. And just recently I was responsible for bringing in a global piece of business across Australia, the US and the UK, which meant for some interesting long days, you can imagine. My son, I had my little boy Teddy while I was at Northern Trust as well, and had a year off of maternity leave too. And I've got to say that Northern Trust has been superb in supporting me with a family, with childcare, with flexible working. In fact, I have a flexible working arrangement today, in that I don't work Friday afternoons. I've kind of kept that on. So the whole, you know, midday bomb burst out on a Friday afternoon to stop working. Usually I can log off by about 1, 2 o'clock if I'm lucky, and then that's me for the rest of the week. I'm done. And I've had that in my contract since I joined Northern Trust, which I think is testament to the you know, to showing that, you know, they are open to flexible working. And certainly now, I've been at home for the last 14 months. I haven't been into the office once. And to be honest, when we do eventually go back to the office, my team has made it very clear that the only reason we should be coming back to the office is to do something very different to what we do on a daily basis from home. We can do our emails. We've all got, you know, work assigned laptops. We can do our emails from anywhere. So the point of coming into the office shouldn't be just to sit and do our emails all day. It should be very much based around, you know, coming in to do those kind of brainstorming ideas, and you know, meeting with other people, getting out to lunch, networking, and all of that great stuff. As part of my current role, I'm also the sales best practice lead for EMEA, and that means there's a lot of similarities between a kind of chief admin officer role, and this is the role where I sit as a kind of devil or an angel on my boss's shoulders, ensuring that we're compliant and following all necessary procedures and processes that we should be doing. In my boss's words, I keep him out of jail. But this is also where I'm able to drive the business forward, but also provide that protection. And I kind of represent the sales team on all the compliance, risk, legal, audit, security and BCP matters, business continuity matters as well. So in terms of my kind of what I value, I guess it's leadership still. I think this means having the assertiveness and the boldness, the strength and the confidence to lead and inspire others. I still bring that to my role every day. And it's about having that respect for others. And I think that that's one thing that I feel when I say I found my home at Northern Trust, I feel that mutual respect is there. They respect me for the value, the contribution that I bring. And certainly I respect my senior management for what they're able to do and how they're able to drive the business forward, but in a way that doesn't put additional pressure on any of their teams. You know, they're very collaborative, but you can make decisions. And that's one of my biggest frustrations in leaving the army and coming into the civilian world. I always used to laugh because I used to feel that it would be like decision by committee. So, oh, come on, let's just get on with it. Let's crack on and get the job done, you know. And I always felt very frustrated, if you like, during some parts of my career that I wasn't able to take that leadership role and to drive things forward. I do feel like I've got that now. It's taken a few years, but you know, having that autonomy and having that ability to kind of drive the business forward has been brilliant. And obviously I'm very passionate about what I do as well. I think that Northern Trust has given me an opportunity not only just to expand my career, but also to continue being a wedge in the door for any ex-military. I've always been very passionate that someone took a chance on me all of those years ago. I didn't know anything about the city. I didn't have that kind of experience. And the fact that someone was able to say, hey, do you know what though, I can see potential in you, and gave me that opportunity to have this brilliant career in the city, has made me feel very thankful, but has always also made me feel that I should give that opportunity back. So I lead the Military Appreciation and Awareness Business Resource Council, which is a long way of saying I lead the Veterans Network at Northern Trust. And we have events, we raise money for military charities, we collaborate with the Officers Association, the CTP, and other organisations around providing opportunities to military service leavers at Northern Trust and other institutions around the city as well. We leverage our network, and I know that Hannah was saying in her, Hattie was saying in her previous speech, it is around network. I absolutely agree. You know, I've got a fantastic network with the city of ex-military service leavers, and I think it's not only is it just, you know, people who speak the same language and have very similar experiences, but it's also sharing ideas around. We did a veterans event, we were able to bring in, you know, X amount of people. We found that the best roles for ex-service leavers were X, Y, and Z, and just leveraging others' experiences and kind of getting an idea as to how they're creating value for veterans in financial institutions. I also sit on the Diversity Project. This is an umbrella organisation which is led by a fantastic woman called Helena Morrissey, and it encompasses all elements of diversity and inclusion. And I asked her whether she had a veterans work stream, and she said no. And so I said, well, do you want one? And so we made it happen. And my role within that veterans work stream is again very much around promoting military service leavers as a great talent pool, a fantastic set of people who have got these incredible transferable skills that financial institutions may have thought about, but it's not just the CEOs and targeted at those exec managers. It's also targeting at the talent acquisition teams, the HR teams, saying, you know, consider this CV that's come through. It's not just you know, they may not have financial experience, but the value they could bring could be exponential when you look at, you know, their experiences and how they could have value to your teams. So I guess that's kind of what I do within you know, my military hat outside of the army now. I guess in terms of advice I would give to women who are interested, it does very much tie in with what Hattie was saying. One, network. You know, just talk to people that have left and talk to people in their current situations. I think we all have our own challenges. We all look back in the army with a little bit of rose-tinted glasses sometimes. You know, things were better when I was in uniform. You know, I was able to get things done, you know, things like that. Civilian life for me has been fantastic. I've been given some wonderful opportunities. But you do have to drive your career forward in the way that you would like. So yeah, I'm currently in the promotion pool as well. I'm moving up to executive director, hopefully next year, which will be phenomenal. But I work bloody hard for it, and let no one tell you that you don't put the hours in, because I do think that I potentially work just as hard or potentially harder now, not to get recognition, not to be seen as equal to my male peers, but just because of the sheer volume of work that you're expected to do. Perhaps that's because I'm in a client-facing or a sales role, but I do feel that the volume of work is a lot more nowadays than it ever was when I was in the armed forces. Different kinds of work as well, different kind of stress. But that's that's fine. It's enjoyable. It challenges me, and I would never want to be in a role that didn't give me that opportunity to stretch. So I guess I would guess that's kind of one of the differences. I suppose the other difference would be around accountability and responsibility. I think during your time in the military, you're given a huge amount of responsibility, whereas civilian world, it's more about accountability for what you do. There is a certain amount of, dare I say it, covering your arse that needs to be done. Not so much in the organisation that I'm in, but certainly in other organisations that I worked for. I've found that you need to be very accountable for the decisions that you make, because there are always those that are able to point the finger, oh, that you made that decision, you pushed that through, you know. So that's one of the other differences I would say between the military world and civilian, but that's painting it in a very different, in a not such a great light. It's fantastic. What I would say is that just in the last year, the sheer amount of support that I've received from my firm around being able to work the hours that I need to work. You know, I have to drop my kids at school. I have had to do home schooling, or the daily struggle juggle, I called it, you know, alongside during my working life. I've had to say, you know, at 3 o'clock, I have to log off for a couple of hours, or I have to give my kids some attention. I'll come back to my emails later on. You know, and they've been fantastic. They've absolutely recognised that this has not been easy, and you know, they've 100% supported us in every way. They're not forcing us to come back to the office. I believe that the current plan for us to come back is to come back 1 day a week, and that 1 day a week will be, like I say, very different to that day at home, if we can, and if we're comfortable doing so. So, you know, there isn't this, you know, push to get us all back into these offices down at Canary Wharf. It's going to be a very different environment when we come back, and that's going to bring some challenges in itself, but I'm sure we'll go for it. I'm looking on the side here because I'm just seeing if there are any other questions that are coming through to kind of help me give you some more guidance. But key things: networking, thinking about how to pitch yourself and brand. That's something that Hattie mentioned, and I would agree with that to a certain extent, but I always also say is my career has been like that. No one's career, I think, nowadays just is a straight line up. And I guess it's have a go would be my biggest piece of advice. It would be, you know, the role that you first take when you leave the army may not be the right role for you, but you will learn things in that role. And the opportunities, once you come out and you've got some experience, there's some civilian firm experience on your CV, it will enable you to kind of look around and see what else is out there. Never in a million years did I think I would find myself working in a bank in the sales team. And I think it's about taking opportunities when they come and keeping an eye out for things that you think might be might be of interest to you. So I guess it's don't throw all your eggs in one basket. You know, don't worry if the role that you first take within, you know, 6 months of leaving the army is not the right role and you don't feel comfortable. And be prepared for that as well. I guess that's the other thing. I certainly remember that first 6-12 months coming out of the army and thinking, oh my God, what have I done? You know, I want to get back in uniform. It is a bit of a learning curve. It will take time to adjust. And that's fine. You know, that's okay. You will adjust. You will pick things up. And have a go is my biggest piece of advice. And if like I say, if the role that you take isn't the right one for you, move on and see what else is out there, you know, and leverage the people that you talk to, and leverage the people around you as well. You know, some people say, hey, do you know what? Have you thought about going in this direction? Maybe you're working in technology projects. Have you thought about doing operations projects, for example, or leverage the networks? You know, a lot of firms nowadays have these military networks, or there are wider military networks you can engage with. You know, start talking to other people about the jobs that they're doing and the challenges that they're facing, but also the opportunities that they've taken. Because I think that will give you some ideas. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And to be honest, if you turn around to me and say, what do you want to do in 5 years' time? I'm still not quite sure. I think I'm a lot more willing to have a go at different things. And if it doesn't work out, then I think I've got that experience now to turn around and say, well, I'll just move on find something else. Are there any other questions?
Lovely. Well, I am quite conscious of time. So Kelly, if you're happy, we'll save questions to the Q&A panel, which is going ahead about 2:30, if you're happy to rejoin then. But thank you for your fantastic insights again. It's always lovely to hear from you.
No problem.
I suggest now that we break maybe just 10 minutes, join back at 1:25, give people time just to grab a cuppa and digest everything that we've heard so far. So yes, we'll gather back at 1:25, ready for Lizzie's presentation, who's representing BlackRock. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to head straight back into the presentations, and so I'm delighted to welcome Lizzie Nicol. So Lizzie served for 9 years in the Royal Artillery after commissioning in 2008. Lizzie then joined the Vets Intern Programme at BlackRock in January 2018 and is currently a portfolio manager within the Global Fixed Income Group. Thanks for giving us your time today, Lizzie. I will hand straight over to you.
Thanks, Esme. Hi, everyone. As Hattie said at the start of her speech, I'm really pleased to be here. I use Officers Association events and also just advice loads when I was looking at leaving. So it's really nice to be able to pay it forward. So yeah, as Esme said, I commissioned in 2009, did 9 years in the Royal Artillery, and very much unlike Hattie's story, I couldn't find anything really transferable about my roles in the army when I was looking to find a role outside. So, my career was mostly close support, gun regiments. I did one job as an ADC, but yeah, the rest of the time was very much on gun positions as an FST commander in a targeting role. So yeah, really had to rack my brains as to what I wanted to do when I left. So I thought about leaving at the 6-year point, and it took me a really long time to work it out, but essentially I realized that I didn't really enjoy being a generalist. I wanted to be a specialist. I wanted to be a subject matter expert, the person that people come to when they needed a problem solved. And as a result, that kind of came out during my army career as well. Actually, I often thought I wish I joined as a soldier and got a trade and progressed my career that way, rather than I sort of found leaving jobs every 2 years and doing something completely different are quite stressful. So I attended a few open days back at that point, but I didn't really find anything that I wanted to make the leap into. And then so I just stayed in the army for another couple of years. And then I think I got to my 8-year point and realized that I was just kind of going with the flow. I looked at what was ahead of me. I was about to promote to major, and ICSC and the jobs after that didn't really excite me. And so I thought, what, I actually just need to sign off now to give myself the kick up the bum to find something else. Otherwise, it won't happen. So that's what I did. I read What Colour Is Your Parachute, which is pretty similar to the skins analogy that was used at the start of this event. Just trying to work out who I am, what it is I enjoy, and then once I'd established all that, what kind of roles I would fit into. And essentially what I came up with, along with attending lots of events and having coffees with people, what I came up with is I wanted to do something fairly technical, but also involved people. And so first I actually started looking at consulting initially, and I found a consulting firm that I was really interested in. It was kind of, it hired science and maths graduates, and it essentially used maths to make businesses more efficient, and that really appealed to me. But then when I looked a bit further into consultancy, I realized actually the lifestyle wouldn't have really made me happy. The lots of nights out of bed and the traveling around, it didn't really appeal. One of the reasons I left the army, or wanted to leave the army, I really wanted to live in my own home. I wanted a base. I wanted to be part of a community. I had ideas of joining a local sports team and playing on a Wednesday night, and silly things as well, like perhaps having a hairdresser that I see regularly rather than once and then never see again. So sounds flippant and sounds silly, but it's all those kinds of things you need to really think about what kind of lifestyle you want, as well as the job. So, and along the way of, you know, having coffees with people, lots of people said, well, you know, you've got a maths background, why don't you think about finance? And, you know, embarrassingly to say now, like I knew absolutely nothing about finance. I hadn't done any investing myself. You know, I was still very much paying off my student loan towards the end of my army career. So, you know, investing was a long way off for me. And also I was at Sandhurst in September 2008. So at the height of the financial crisis, when essentially the world was ending in the real world, you know, I was busy digging trenches and trying to work out what to pack in a Bergen. So yeah, financial crisis pretty much passed me by as well. So I had a lot to learn and catch up on in the world of finance. And one person in particular that I had a coffee with suggested finance, and he said, you know, if you have no idea what you want to do or go into, why don't you do the IMC, the Investment Management Certificate, which is an exam that you could essentially use your learning credits for. It's you know, it's not a huge amount of work. There's 2 exams, both are 100 hours work recommended each. You can sit it at a driving license centre whenever you want to. But what it does is it covers all the topics of finance. So, you know, there's accounting, there's economics, there's fixed income, there's equities, there's derivatives, portfolio construction. So it gives you a really good broad understanding of finance. And yeah, this man in particular said, you know, why don't you do that and see whether any of that interests you? Which I you know, I went to do. I think a little bit like, was it Sheryl Sandberg that said that you know, men will apply for a job if they can do 30% of the job description, and, you know, women will only apply if they can do 70 or 80%. You know, I was put off applying to jobs in finance just because I just felt like I knew so little. So this exam gave me a fair amount of confidence, well, a bit more confidence. And little did I know actually that the exam is actually fairly useful. So companies like BlackRock actually give their graduates some time off at the start of their careers to study for those exams, because especially if you're in a client-facing role, the regulation part of it is kind of a baseline qualification that's required. So it was a fairly useful thing to have done beforehand. And I discovered anyway that I was really interested in fixed income. And then that gave me kind of launch pad to sort of research the kind of jobs that I would like to apply for. And then I went about applying for jobs and roles by applying to the intern programs that were that fitted in with my timeline. So at my time, it was BlackRock, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. I think Citi and Barclays ran one as well, but it was just a slightly different date that didn't fit in with when I was leaving. And I found those programs, to be honest, a little bit like regimental selection. So in the same way that you go on regimental visits and you chat to people and you hear presentations and you sort of decide where you might fit in, that's exactly how I saw that process. So, Goldman Sachs perhaps, is seen as, the culture there as being slightly aggressive and competitive. It sort of didn't really appeal to me. I didn't leave the open day there with such a great vibe, but BlackRock's I really did. I'm not sure how much people know about finance, but BlackRock isn't an investment bank. So it isn't an investment bank like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. It's an asset manager. So its sole purpose really is to, its purpose in that Larry Fink says is that it's to help more and more people find financial well-being. And the principles of BlackRock really fit in actually with kind of the core principles of the army, which also appeals to me. Lots of people have kind of mixed views on these internships. So like me, I would suggest, it's a really good entry point into these roles. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't have the job that I have now if it wasn't for the internship. My CV just probably wouldn't have even passed a sift going for this job that I'm in. And also, I wouldn't have even known what this job is if it wasn't for the internship. But, some people also argue that you do get paid less to start. You're an intern, you're not going into a direct hire role. And also there's a fair amount of uncertainty when you're signing up to an internship, and you know, after a very secure career in the armed forces, it's understandable that what you want really is sort of certainty that you've got a job to go into. And again, you know, the internships are different length. So again, that's another thing to consider. So when I applied, Goldman Sachs was 2 weeks, JP Morgan was 3 months, and BlackRock one was 6 months. And both the Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgan ones were, you could intern in business areas that didn't necessarily have headcount at the end. So there's a chance that you would do this internship and there wouldn't be a job to go into even if they did like you. Whereas the BlackRock option, they only offer internships in business areas that have headcount. So that to me felt like a less scary option, even though it was 6 months of an internship and not being sure of having a job. So yeah, that was my thought process. As far as what I do now, so yeah, I'm a portfolio manager. Lots of people, and I'm sorry for people that, you know, do understand a lot about finance, but just go back to basics. Lots of people, when you're thinking about investing, think of stocks rather than fixed income, which is what I'm in. So I'll just explain it in terms of stock. So, you know, for example, you wanted to invest in Apple or Amazon, you might want to invest in those individual companies, or what you might want to do is get exposure to the full S&P 500. And so I manage index funds that would replicate the bond equivalent of that S&P 500. So my day really is spent, you know, dealing with inflows and outflows into our funds. I'll be buying and selling bonds to get our funds in line with those indices. I would also be attending client meetings, you know, clients that come to BlackRock and say, you know, we want to invest in this, you know, what have you got to offer? And also internal meetings of new funds that we might be launching to offer to the market and whether it's feasible. So my main focus now is ESG investing, so environmental, social and governance. Certainly younger generations are more concerned about where their money is going when they're investing. So, you know, we have funds that exclude tobacco, alcohol, fossil fuels, that are focused on the Paris 2-degree alignment initiative. So yeah, that's my focus, managing those funds and helping launch new funds that we think are investable. I was very happy to come in at a junior level. So, you know, I was happy to start right back again. There were times, I started at 32, there were times when I was being told off by a 23-year-old where I'd go home and question, you know, what have I done here? What have I done with my life as well? So yeah, so the level of technicality in the role you want sort of depends, I guess, how happy you are to go down that rung, which, you know, there's pros and cons to both. It took me a year to get signed off as a portfolio manager. So I'm still at an associate level, which is the level I joined at 3 years ago. Potentially going up for promotion this year, hopefully. But there's other people that joined on the internship that went into less technical roles that would have promoted, you know, in the first year they joined. So yeah, it's just another thing to consider, you know, what's important to you. Is it the rank recognised from, you know, your experience you've had in the army as well? Or are you happy to drop down a few levels? My usual day is 8 until 6:30, with a 30-minute break for lunch. You know, sometimes that can be longer, sometimes that's shorter, but I've never had to work a weekend. My role is fairly tied to market hours and reactive to flows on the day, so I don't have a huge amount of flexibility to step away from my desk for a few hours and do something else and make up for it in the evening. But that's particular to my role. You know, there are other roles within the building that, you know, do allow for that flexibility. At our Vets Open Day we had at the beginning of the year, you know, other vets were giving their spiel about their job, and, you know, they step off the desk for a 2-hour bike ride at lunch and a swim. So, you know, there is the work, there is the balance. Now, so yeah, I'll just quickly touch on the next open day and intake for the internship, just so people are interested. So the plan is very much for it to be a 6-month internship with an open day in, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, at the end of October, hopefully in person. Applications will be sort of due the end of November, interviews December, January time, with the internship looking to start February, March. And as I said earlier, you know, the roles and the internship is offered in business areas where people have headcount, ideally with a look to turn that into a full-time role at the end of the 6 months, but there isn't an obligation to you to stay in that role. So you can do your 6 months, and you can use that opportunity to also look elsewhere in the business, where else might interest you, and apply to those areas. I'm very conscious that my job's fairly nerdy, and I really don't want that to put people off. If it seems that to you, you know, please still consider looking at BlackRock, because there's loads of business areas and roles that are open to you. Just to name a few of the ones that currently have vets in, so the risk management, business operations, relationship management, all the client-facing sales roles, in the investment team, so also in the sustainability investing area. And then this year, HR are also looking to open up roles in HR, marketing, and corporate comms as well. They're areas that haven't had vets yet, and so they don't necessarily know the benefits of hiring a vet. But you know, they're going to try and approach them and say, you know, this is what you can get to open up those roles to us. And then I'm conscious of time as well. So yeah, touching on flexible working and getting work-life balance. So yeah, as I said, it's not something I've needed to do yet in this role. But that said, I am due to go on maternity leave in a month's time. And I probably initially wasn't all that confident that this was a job that I could come back to, but everything that's happened over the last 14 months, proving that we can work from home, the fact that BlackRock's future of work is actually going to look like 3 days a week in the office, all means that I'm fully confident that I'll be able to come back to this job and continue when I come back from maternity leave. So yeah, I know there's companies out there that have said you'll never have to work in the office again, and there's others that have said, you know, the Goldman Sachs of the world, you're expected to be in the office. BlackRock fully respects the kind of hybrid model. It recognises the advantages we get from all being in the office together, and that's where we learn, that's where we innovate, but also it recognises that, you know, we've proved that we can be more flexible. So yeah, I'm pretty excited that that's definitely going to be an option for me. And then, you know, as far as a company to work for, I'm biased, I guess, because it's the only company that I have worked for since leaving the army, but there's some really brilliant stuff with regards to benefits. During the pandemic, you know, we all got free subscriptions to the Calm app. There was lots of talks on mental health. You know, they really took that side of things seriously. Going on maternity leave, I get 4.5 hours of coaching with what's called a comeback coach that specialise in returning from, you know, long extended periods off, especially maternity leave. They're really focused on the diverse workforce at the minute and attracting and retaining female talent. You know, we didn't have any applicants to the BlackRock internship last year, and that may have been a case of bad advertising and bad people just didn't really know about it. But you know, I'm now part of a working group in hope to address that. So please, if anyone's interested, reach out. Definitely do it on LinkedIn, because I won't be on my work emails at that time. But yeah, there's lots of exciting opportunities. And the last thing I'll touch on just quickly. So I think someone asked at the start, you know, what are the key traits that, you know, that vets bring to the party. So resilience, and I can't remember what the other one was mentioned, but also communication and the level of maturity. So certainly in BlackRock, what vets have found is, you know, it's quickly seen, you know, that you're competent and that you can communicate well, and you're very quickly given a level of responsibility that's above your experience in in the technical side of things. And at the end, the last thing I'll just say is definitely reach out to veterans if there's any businesses or business areas you're interested in. I think we're all really grateful to the Vets Network for getting the jobs that we've got. We're friendly faces. We'll be able to explain stuff in a language that you understand. The world of 3-letter acronyms in finance is worse than it is in the military. So having a vet explain that stuff to you is really beneficial. And yeah, we're all really keen to pay it forward as well. And that's me.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lizzie. As with the others, if you're happy, we'll save questions for the Q&A panel. I think will be best.
Sure.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, Citi are, as well as BCG, are kindly sponsoring this webinar today. We're also delighted that Emily Turner has able to give up her time and join us today to share her insights into Citi as an organisation. So Emily is the head of business development for Citi's institutional clients group and has a wealth of other experience prior to Citi, including working for UBS and McKinsey. So thanks, Emily. I will hand over to you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for the time today. The plan was to share a little bit about Citi, a little bit on my career background, and hopefully have some questions from all of you. So just for some quick context on Citi, we at Citi are very much a global bank. We have two main businesses. One is our global consumer bank, where our customers are individuals, and then two, we have the institutional clients group, which is where I sit in the organization, where our clients are corporations, institutional investors. We work closely with companies like BlackRock, so very good to go right after Lizzie. Public sector institutions, insurance companies, essentially anything where it's not an individual. And what we do for those companies and those clients is we look to help them solve their financial services needs around the world. And just to put some numbers to this, we move trillions of dollars a day around the world, and the majority of the largest companies in the world are Citi clients. We also help them when they want to buy or do sort of other life events around a company themselves. We help them access capital markets. We help them manage their risks and do very basic banking services. So things that you and I have as individuals, be it bank accounts, making payments, credit cards, we provide all of those services for institutions. Great. So when we think about where are we different and how do we differentiate ourselves, we are in more countries than any other bank in the world. We operate in nearly 100 countries with people on the ground in those countries, and the idea is to bring to our clients real insight and understanding of how those markets work. So if you are a large consumer goods company and you want to expand into France, how do you open a bank account? How do you pay your employees? We have people in those countries to help our clients understand those questions and set up the optimal, effectively financial services and banking services for themselves to achieve their business goals. And where we think, we really excel is with those customers who see the world as their market. So for companies that are looking to achieve scale and breadth across the world, be it from suppliers or the customer side of their own customers, that's where we look to really add value to Citi's institutional clients. But ultimately, we are really about the employees at Citi. So we're over 200,000 employees at Citi today, and hopefully some of you will be eager to join us. And we have a long history of embracing diversity in many different ways. And so if I just start sort of from the female diversity side, and one of my colleagues will speak through how we engage with veterans. Having a diverse workforce, particularly around gender, is very important to us. You may be aware that Citi is the first major bank in the world to actually have a female CEO, and we are one of the first banks to achieve 50-50 representation of our board. We have a very active women's affinity network, and really the aim is to bring in more talented women, set them up for success, retain them, help them develop, get into larger and larger roles, and promote them. And so on this slide, you can see a number of things that we do, but it's really about, supporting each other, supporting our colleagues, and in spirit of ensuring that we have the best and brightest talent. And so there's a huge number of efforts here across all sort of different phases and needs of women's lives. I think, in the last discussion we heard about maternity, that being one, but sort of not the only one, of how we look to support women at Citi. And so, this is a core value of ours, and it's not just something we talk about, it's something that we very much live every single day. So it's one of the reasons that I love working at Citi. I've been here nearly 10 years, but it is core to what we do, in that we look to not only progress in each of our businesses, but we recognize that to progress in the future, it's about developing the best talent, bringing in the best talent for what comes next. So in addition to our women's network, and we have a number of different affinity networks, we also have Citi Salutes. And this is our network for our veterans across Citi globally. I am not a veteran myself, but this is a very important affinity group. In terms of me and my team, one of the things that I do as part of business development is I'm responsible for our innovation efforts across our institutional clients group. And one of the key parts of that is doing research and development into new technologies. And so we have entire teams that look at things like data science and blockchain, and a number of other topics. And the largest group of those is actually in Tel Aviv, where the vast majority of our team there is veterans, as well as across all other regions. Personally, in my own team, I've had service members from the US, from Israel, and from a number of other countries in my team. And it's been really extraordinary how this talent is able to bring in really great leadership characteristics that we look for in our talent at Citi, but come in day one, almost pushing us to a higher bar. So this is, to me, the Citi Salutes Affinity Group is a really amazing organization within Citi that, even though, as I said, I'm not a veteran myself, really makes us better as a firm. I don't know, Lawrence, if you want to add.
Thanks, Emily. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Brilliant. So thank you very much. So my name is Lawrence Whittiam. I'm a foreign exchange sales trader at Citi, but before that, I spent 7 years in the British Army, and I'm now co-head of military recruitment in London, and working with people like Emily to help place military veterans into our business. Our program has been running since 2014 in the UK. It's been running a long time before that in the US, and it's part of Citi's global commitment to support veterans into employment. In London, we only have a front office function in London. Our back office is not located in the UK. So actually, our focus here is placing people solely into front office positions. And how we do that is we piggyback people into our graduate program. And when I say graduate program, what I'm talking about there is a business school graduate program. I'm not talking so much about people coming straight out of university. So we're able to place people all the way through our institutional clients group business. I came in 2015 and now work on the trading floor in the markets business, but we've got people who work now from investment banking, M&A advisors, all the way through to working our cash management program. And we are shortly going to be launching our Military Insight Day applications. I'm very happy to take questions on that when we get to the Q&A panel. But yeah, military recruitment here is taken extremely seriously, and we're really, really strongly supported by the business. So Emily, over to you.
Sure, thank you, Lawrence. Very happy to take questions on my career or anything at Citi or what we're doing in innovation. My role today spans, as I mentioned, innovation as well as partnerships and strategy for Citi. So essentially, I spend my days thinking through where is growth going to come from and how do we achieve that, recognizing that in many cases, growth won't be Citi working on our own, it's working with partners. So we, as an example, invest in startups. We work very actively with them. Citi is one of the most active venture capital investors of any bank. Last year alone, we invested in, I believe, just over 30 startups, and we look to work with them. And so my days really span thinking about payments in different parts of the world, to how do we make people's lives earlier, how do we give them the tools to set them up for success, and then also importantly, how, what are the things that make people happier in their jobs, and how do we think about changing processes, changing protocols, changing market structure to achieve that. I got to my role through a fair bit of luck, I would say, and happenstance, and also, really by being at Citi. The fact that Citi is such a global business and involved in so many different things has given me exposure to a number of different parts of the organization. I've been here just about 10 years, and I started doing a fair bit of work when I first joined around how do we find more valuable clients. That sort of very coincidentally led me into big data. I worked with some of our data scientists in the early days when we were building out that capability. I sort of through that started to work with our teams that invest in startups, because they said, hey, how would you use this technology? I ended up moving to start an incubator within Citi that has grown, and we actually spun out a company last year that raised just over $20 million. We've launched other significant initiatives. And then 2 years ago, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I grew up, so I took a sabbatical under Citi's sabbatical policy. I interned at a startup in California. I worked in a soup kitchen, and I traveled the world. And when I came back, my now boss had become the head of the ICG, so running the largest business at Citi. And as I was going through literally thousands of emails at my desk, trying to get through the backlog from when I was away, which I candidly didn't get through, I just largely filed them. He pinged me to say, would I like to come in and work with him and start a new team focused on growth. And I share that story both to give you all perspective on my career to the extent you have any questions, but also to speak to the culture that we have at Citi, in that, it's really about people who can spot opportunities and then pursue them is what's recognized and rewarded here. And for every great idea I've had, I've definitely had 10, if not more, terrible ideas. And it's a place where you can do that and be, through a combination of humility and grit, still very much recognized for thinking differently and questioning things in a data-driven way. I don't know if there are any questions from the group, but very happy to take any.
Hi, Emily. We had a couple come in actually before the event,
Sure.
and one specifically for Citi, and it was around kind of level of education and recommended qualifications. So A, to be eligible for this veterans program, but also more generally, are there any qualifications that you would recommend that Citi really value and respect?
Yeah. Lawrence, do you want to cover the specifically for the Military Insight Day?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Emily. Specifically for our structured programs at Citi, we ask for a minimum level of 2-1 undergraduate degree. We are ultimately pitting people against the people who are coming out of business school, and we've got to give people a chance to succeed. So that's why we have an undergraduate requirement of a 2-1. We don't mind in what subject.
Yeah, and maybe to that sort of subject point. So I studied sociology at university. I started my career in banking, having initially never taken an accounting class or a finance class. I do have to say both my parents were bankers, so through osmosis, I understood a few things, but certainly nothing formally. But what I would say for Citi is it's about being very good at something and having deep curiosity around that thing and an aptitude to learn, more so than necessarily coming in with very specific skills in any one place. This is an industry which really is based on an apprenticeship model. And so it's more about intellect, drive, and I'd say some of the intrinsics about working hard, being a good communicator, things like that. And obviously we do coach and provide our teams support on those as well and to develop, but it's more about coming in with the intrinsics and a curiosity and a desire to learn than necessarily hard skills on day one.
Fantastic, thank you. I can see we do have a few questions, but I suggest we save those for the panel. Lawrence, I know that you'll be joining us and we'll be able to field those. But thank you, Emily. I can appreciate how busy you must be, but really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I hope that I will get to meet some of you at Citi in the near term or elsewhere in the industry. Thanks.
Brilliant. So I am now quite excited to introduce our final speaker of the session before we head on to the Q&A panel. And this is Kelly Berman. So after leaving the army in 2019, Kelly set up her own cybersecurity consultancy. However, when lockdown happened, this was put on ice. And in December of 2020, Kelly started work at PA as a principal consultant within the digital transformation and cybersecurity department. So Kelly, thank you for joining us today. It'd be great to hear about your experience in industry and what you've learned so far.
Hi there. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can see and hear you loud and clear.
Immortal words of working from home. Hi, yes. So I've been working in PA for about 6 months now. In terms of my career, I had about 19 years serving in the army, and that was in the Royal Corps of Signals. So my job primarily was looking at electronic warfare and cyber security while I was in. Some of the highlights whilst I was in, like Kelly, I know Kelly Mullane from many years ago. She was one of my Arabic instructors a good 12 years ago at least. And one of the highlights was serving in Iraq, one of the human teams with my Arabic skills. I was also seconded to the Cabinet Office for 3 months whilst I was working in Defence Intelligence when I was leading the team for the Libya crisis, seconded to Washington with DIA, and I was DS at ICSC and commanding an electronic warfare squadron in Afghanistan as well. And I was also lucky enough to attain an in-service degree from Cambridge, an MPhil in 2017, and then finally left the Army whilst I was heading the Army's Defensive Cyber Programme in 2018-2019, just after my second baby was born. So that's a little bit about my military career. And then looking at sort of the reasons why I left in the end, one of the reasons I left was because I just had my second baby. We'd been moving around, as a lot of you will know, that challenge in terms of having to be posted and move your family around. Sort of we'd moved probably 5 times in 3-4 years. And so we just made the decision between me and my husband that was it. We wanted to get out now as well. So we'd kind of done all the fun stuff. And now we wanted to have a second career. So my husband had already been out by about 5-6 years by that point. And I decided I was going to make the jump as well. I wanted to sort of get more from my life and sort of gain more opportunities and more learning as well out there. So by sort of January 2020, I'd made the decision actually what I was going to do was set up my own company. So I had some skills already, I had some good background, and I was going to set the company up, get it going, and then my husband would join me. But then obviously lockdown happened. So by that point there, we'd had about two clients primarily. We had another 2 ready to go before lockdown happened. So all of that had to be put on ice, unfortunately, while I did the full-time childcare, because my husband had a full-time job at that point. And so that at least gave me the time to work out what it was that I wanted to do, whether I was going to continue with setting up our business, or whether I was just going to sort of look around in the interim period and just try and get something that was going to pay the bills. So it gave me that breathing space, I suppose, whilst I was doing the childcare, to think about what was important to me and what I wanted from a career change. And also during that transition, I was lucky enough to sort of do some of the courses whilst I was in the army, and also whilst I was transitioning out, just to sort of dip my toe in to see what was interesting to me and what I wanted to sort of base my future career on. But I can go into more detail about that later on. And so I started to put my CV out to some friends across LinkedIn and some ex-colleagues, and some offers for interview came back. Some were successful, some weren't. And I sort of then started to look around at what else I was going to be interested in. And I really looked far and wide. I didn't just specialize straight away in cybersecurity or consulting itself. I really looked around. I was looking at the NHS and NHS jobs, cybersecurity within that aspect. I was looking locally in charities, just trying to work out what fit me as a future career. And it was September of last year that one of the people who had interviewed me a good couple of months beforehand, they had not been able to take me on because they had closed down the consulting side, but he passed my CV on to somebody else and asked if I was interested, if I could talk to them within PA. it went forward, and within sort of 3-4 months they'd made me an offer to accept. But it's the same with all things. At the same time, I was also offered 2 other jobs, one of which was with Microsoft Azure, and I then had to I was in the very fortunate position at that point to think, well, what really is important? What is it that I want from my job? And I'll go into that a little bit later on. But in the end, I chose PA because I wanted to have a look at the breadth of roles rather than become a specialist in depth in one particular one. I wanted to be able to move and switch around into different projects that were going to interest me and keep learning. And so when I started with PA, I was completely naive and I didn't have a clue what consultancy was about, really. I didn't understand what my daily job was going to be because we'd been in lockdown and there wasn't really anybody I could ask to see what they were particularly doing. And I didn't really know anybody who worked in the cybersecurity side of consultancy. So it was very much rabbit in headlights for the first few weeks while I worked out what my role was going to be and how I was going to add value. But I'm really glad I did make that jump, and I did make the jump to PA as well, because in that respect, they couldn't have been more welcoming, especially at that particular time. So we were doing the virtual onboarding. We weren't able to meet anybody. But the amount of people who got in touch just to sort of welcome me in and do virtual chats and virtual coffees. And for the first of 4 or 5 weeks, at least, it was just people trying to help me and make me feel more welcome, and just to introduce me to consultancy as a whole. And also to reassure me that I wasn't necessarily being pigeonholed, that actually my skill set was relevant across all the different sectors. So although I've got a defence and security background, that I was welcome to jump into jobs within healthcare or financial services or transport or public services, that actually the job I was going to be doing was fairly agnostic in that respect. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to join as well, was to be able to keep learning and working with different sectors. And so on a daily basis, working from home and working virtually, I would say with 2 children, I'll sort of go to the gym in the morning. I'll then drop them off at nursery and school, and I'll start at 9 o'clock. And generally I'll finish as long as I get my work done during that day. There's no sort of clocking on, clocking off period. But on a general basis, I'll finish around about 4:30, 5 o'clock, with an hour for lunch, and sometimes I do a bit of fizz during the day as well. So nobody's breathing down your neck. There's nobody sat next to you in the office who looking to see what you're doing and when you're leaving. As long as you've got your work done that day, it really doesn't matter what time you're clocking off or clocking on, as long as you're meeting all your assignments and you're attending all the meetings you need to attend as well. And the ball is very much in your court in terms of ensuring that you keep your own learning up to date. They provide lots of learning online that you need to sort of keep getting into and learning more about, for example, agile or licensing to operate, or how things work in the healthcare sector. And they'll provide all of that you need to learn for yourself as you go along. And then in terms of why I chose PA, I looked at a lot of different industries, and I think I centered on consultancy and then PA specifically. Consultancy because I like that breadth. I like to be able to maybe do sort of work for 3 weeks or 3 months or even a year if I really enjoyed the client I was working for. I also like the idea of moving back into national security. So just waiting for my clearances to come across so I can move back into working where I was comfortable working before, working with that particular type of client, which requires a lot more in terms of clearance. But also, if I want to, I can jump up and I can learn more about the healthcare industry, or I can learn more about working locally within my own borough, my own district, so policing, the NHS, healthcare, etc. There's an awful lot going on all across the country that if there's an opening, there's no reason why you can't jump in to add value. And it's not necessarily just in cybersecurity that I can add value. It's more in terms of what I can bring in terms of delivery and talking to the client and putting things together, the problem solving aspect. And that was one thing I wanted to say as well, is that so my background is not STEM, is not technical at all. My background is actually languages and intelligence from when I was serving in the military. But I think gradually, as I was working in my last job within cyber, although the job title said cyber, my background wasn't necessarily in-depth technical cyber. So I just started to increase in terms of my knowledge, strategic knowledge primarily of cyber and how it worked in the bigger picture. So I don't have an in-depth technical knowledge, but I've got a fairly good broad sense of what cyber is and what cybersecurity means for a firm in terms of aligning with business objectives, etc. But I built on that by when I was transitioning through, or when I knew I wanted to leave, I looked at what different qualifications I could gain in order to try and make myself more amenable to employers, more attractive to employers if I was moving into cybersecurity. And also because at the time I was thinking of setting up my own business, so I needed to know what was going to give me a good foundation So I used my SLC to get my CISM course, which is, if you're looking at doing sort of more strategic, I would look at CISM rather than CISP. But there's so many things out there in terms of what you can use through your Officers Association or through veterans associations that you can get for free, not necessarily having to use your SLC. But I would advise you, before you necessarily jump into anything, is to really do your research and see what appeals to you in terms of what you'd like to jump into afterwards. In terms of why I chose PA, I looked at a number of different consultancies, and although I applied to all of them, I applied to about 4 or 5. 3 of them got back to me, and I got offers from 2, not including PA, and also from Microsoft Azure. And in the end, it came down to culture as to why I made the decision I made. And I think in terms of what you're looking to jump into, is not to just jump into the first company that makes you an offer necessarily, or even the one that makes the highest offer for salary, or even the highest in terms of your grade. It's really important to make sure it's a good fit for you personally as well, because these made it very, very clear from the outset that they were very much about flexible working and supporting people working from home who had children or who had other things going on in their life. And they've really stepped up to the plate, and they've been true to their word in that. Nobody's ever questioned if I need to take time off, or they've been very concerned if I have had to take time off, always checking back in. There's a very proactive mental health side of things, and there's a very proactive and very strong military network as well, in trying to pay it forward and bring veterans into PA. There's a very strong military network across PA as well. And they've been incredible in terms of keeping me involved and keeping my hand in, and also doing charity events as well. So that's been really nice. It's made the transition from the military much easier in terms of being able to just jump onto that group and just have a good chat with people who like-minded people as well. And in terms of trying to put my head into where you guys are at now, I remember very much as I was leaving the military and I was entering that period of sort of the no man's land of what am I going to do next? Where am I going to get, am I going to get a job? What am I going to do? How much am I going to get? When am I going to get, am I going to get a job at all? It was purely by chance that I had that time to stop and breathe because of COVID. And I think I put together sort of the top 10 tips in terms of the advice that I can give you to hopefully put your mind at ease, that it's just not to stress about things and not to worry about what are my skill sets going to be good for? I don't know exactly how I'd fit in, how my skills transfer from the military. And I'd say, so the first tip would be just take some time before you decide what you're going to do to think about not necessarily what job you want to do, but what aspects of your life are really important to you. So do you have children already, or are you planning to have children? Is flexible working and flexible time at home really, really important to you, working from home? For example, I know COVID has hit, but I haven't yet done any client-based work at all. I've always worked from home, and the client's been more than happy. And I know that PA are looking at this as a way of going forward, that if the clients are happy that we're working virtually all the time, then perhaps we can look at maybe doing 1 day every 2 weeks in going forward. But at the moment, there's no plans to take us away from home, and I've certainly never worked later than 6 o'clock at night to attend a meeting. So in that respect, if working from home or flexible working is important to you, you have to put that down as one of your main criteria. Challenging yourself. Are you happy in terms of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone? Are you willing to take chances in terms of doing something you've never thought you could do? Feeling out of your depth, because when you leave and you do join a new job, you will be totally out of your depth. As long as you're aware that that's going to happen and you're comfortable with that, then you'll be absolutely fine. And also, do you have strong people skills, presentation skills? What's your background? Is it STEM? Is it languages? Is it delivery, etc.? It's just working out what's important to you, because there's a reason you're leaving the military, and it's not just to jump into the first job that comes along. There's obviously something that's making you want to have this second career change. So it's worth taking the time to think, okay, well, this is potentially going to be me and my career for my second career from now on. So it has to be the right choice, really. And the second point would be to research. There's so much out there that you don't know, and you probably realize you don't know it. And the only way you're going to understand what's out there that you might potentially be a really good fit for is just to research the different companies. So, for example, if you go on the PA website, it's not just about cybersecurity and healthcare. There are other sort of jobs and capabilities out there that I didn't realize existed. So things like delivery, it's all about or change management or behavioral change, and these are all things that actually people with military backgrounds have got a fantastic skill in, but they just don't realize it at the time. So it's worth taking a little bit of time to do some research about what jobs are out there with job titles that you've never necessarily heard of, but actually you might be a really good fit for. So a lot of military people within PA are in client delivery, change management, and managing successful programs and project delivery. And they may not have been roles that they would have thought about beforehand. So it's worth taking a bit of time just to think, okay, what are my skill sets and what are the jobs out there that I haven't necessarily heard of yet that may be a good fit for me? Tip 3 would be don't underestimate yourself. So a lot of people assume that because they've got just military skills that don't necessarily translate into a civilian qualification, that actually they haven't got any skill set at all, which is completely untrue. In terms of your ability to present, to speak to people, to adapt to new situations really quickly, to learn things quickly, to be comfortable with being uncertain and to be in uncomfortable and stressful situations, your work ethic that you'll have picked up through the military, your ability to work in a team and to pull your weight, your strong work ethic and dedication, all of these are skills that are hugely appreciated and valued by your future employer. And that's why there is normally such a push to get ex-military into these jobs, because they already come ready armed with a great work ethic and an ability to learn and adapt very quickly. I understand that the challenge is how to translate that in your CV, but once you've got your foot in the door, if you can get yourself into an interview, it's almost guaranteed a lot of the time that you'll be really successful in going through that because of how you present yourself naturally. The 4th tip is to network, and this doesn't come very naturally to people in the military. I know it doesn't always come naturally to me, and it never did before, but the ability to leverage on people that you knew and know through LinkedIn, through current military, through ex-military colleagues, just to see what's out there, just to keep those relationships ticking over, and just to ask them questions about what are you doing since you've left, what does your daily day look like, and they'll be more than happy to help you out. Even just things like what kind of grade should I be pitching myself at, what skill set do you think I could use to pitch for this particular job? And that's another thing, to tailor your skills for the job that you're going for, as well as have 4 or 5 different CVs ready to go that you can send out that would be suitable for different jobs. They just speak a slightly different language to each other. So yeah, networking through LinkedIn and ex-colleagues is hugely important, because that was what got me my current job, that somebody reached out back to me and said, I found this for you, are you interested? And if I hadn't taken the time to sort of nurture that relationship, it wouldn't have happened. The next one is to use your transition period as you're leaving the service, or as you're looking to get your new job, is just to shore up your qualifications, because although we know that there's a lot of qualifications that you pick up within the military that are military specific, what you need to do now is to get the ones that speak to civilian employers. So there's a huge amount of different qualifications out there that you can either use your SLC for, your ELC, or you can often get for free through your veterans networks. But I'd advise you to use that time as much as you can. One of the mistakes I made when I was leaving was that I was concentrating on finishing my job and doing the best I could, which is great, but it meant I then didn't take the time to make sure that my CV was as good as it possibly could have been when I left, and I was often giving up the chance to do a course that it would have looked good on my CV, in order to make sure that the role I was doing with the military was being done, because that's the way we think, and that's the way we work. We're just very, very diligent. But I would say be a little bit more selfish when you're going to be leaving, that actually you're going to be leaving that job. So be more selfish and get those qualifications under your belt while you can, while you've got the time as well. And dip your toe into things that you may not necessarily think are your strength, just to see if they're a good fit, because you might be surprised. Don't make assumptions that you will only fit into one pigeonhole category. Try a lot of different things and see what actually there might be something else that appeals to you. Tip number 6, I would say, is be open-minded. I know a couple of the other speakers have said the same, is not to assume that just because you've got a certain skill set and certain background that that's what you have to do for the rest of your life. Just be bold, just apply for lots of different things that, like they were saying, you may only have a few qualifications that you think you're suitable for, but actually you may not realize it, but there's a lot of depth underneath you that you may not see, but an employer will definitely want to leverage and definitely want to use. when you get out and you start to compare yourself to a lot of your civilian peers, you will realise that actually in many aspects you are head and shoulders above a lot of them in terms of what you offer. So you may not have specific qualifications or 8-9 years of experience in that particular field, but as an all-rounder in terms of what you bring and the value you bring to employers, you will be surprised at how much you do offer. And it's always a pleasant surprise as well. So just be a bit more bold and assertive in terms of what you're going to go for. Try lots of different jobs. When I was trying, I eventually put my CV around quite a lot. And they generally say it'll take about 6 times of being told no, of failing, before you get accepted and get your offer. So don't take that failure personally. Also, just be kind to yourself. Don't stress too much. It's an easy trap to fall into, to think I have to get a job now. The first job I get, that's it, that's me. The first offer I'm going to jump straight into it. You've got time to just sit back and think, because yes, you could jump into a job and then sort of keep moving on, but you probably want to take a little bit of time just to work out actually where is it that I want to fit. What's my culture? What are my strengths? What's my tribe? Essentially, what do I want to move into? And also, just because you can't yet do something like a couple of the other speakers were saying at this moment, so if you don't have a STEM background or a financial services background or accounting, and it doesn't matter, if that's something that is of interest to you, there is no reason why you wouldn't actually bring value to that particular career. So it's worth taking the time just to have a look at different courses that are out there that you can try out. And even if you realise halfway through the course that actually it's not for you, at least you can discount that, but it's also still on your CV. So you can use a lot of that to your advantage as well. But there's so many different courses out there that you can use. There's coaching courses, there's lots of investment banking courses, there's the CISM courses that you can do to your advantage as well for getting a job afterwards as well. And then my next tip would be to think outside the box. If there may not necessarily be a pigeonholed job that's ready dressed for you, and so what else is there that you could do? For example, you could start up your own business. I mean, there's lots of people I know who have left, who did, for example, an upholstery course and now run their own upholstering business, and it's very successful. And the guy who did the plumbing course, and he has set up his own a plumbing business now. Again, he's got a huge turnover, and so it's not necessarily jumping into a new job or a high flying job or a high well paid job in the city. It's trying to think laterally of, okay, well, these are my skills. Could I start up my own business? Because again, through the veterans charities, there's an awful lot of courses that you can do for setting up your own business, and they'll talk through the tax implications. These are the courses that I did, and they really helped me in terms of understanding how I would set my own business up and the legal implications and things that I would need to think about. So don't think you immediately have to jump into a job to pay the bills. You could also start your own business if you feel that that's something that you would enjoy. And there's a lot of people who've done that very, very successfully in leaving the army. And then just my final tip in that is just to remember, which is very easy for me to say, but it's only a job. Like I said, you're leaving the military for a reason. You've only got one life, and you want to go into something that's going to pay for you to enjoy your life, rather than something that's just going to be a second army career whereby you're constantly firefighting and constantly working long hours. You want something that you can now start to enjoy your life. You've got all that life experience behind you. And you've now got the luxury, you may not realize it, but you've got the luxury of being able to sit back and start to enjoy your job and enjoy your career, but now that you're the experienced one. And that's everything for me. Just finishing just short of time. Happy to take any questions when we come to it.
Fantastic.
To say as well, we are recruiting within PA, very strongly recruiting across all sectors as well. We're growing rapidly, and we're actually getting more work in than we can handle. So please, if anybody has any questions about moving into consultancy and what it implies and what you need within any of the sectors, please don't hesitate to get in touch, because we're looking for people quite desperately.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Kelly, and thanks to all of our speakers for all of your fantastic presentations. So as I mentioned earlier, to wrap up the day, I would like to invite all of our speakers and sit on our virtual Q&A panel. So we've had a few questions submitted before the event, throughout the event, and also if everyone in the audience, please feel free to either raise your hand and ask your question directly, or put it in the chat box, and I can facilitate the question. So Lawrence has joined from the panel. Obviously, Lawrence, you introduced yourself earlier, which was fantastic, but we also have Katie Fletcher, one of our sponsors from BCG. Hattie, there was a question that came up within your presentation around a case study at interview, whether you'd be able to share your, maybe your experience as well of interviewing for a consultancy role. Hattie, over to you.
Sure. I'll just start with the EY process that I went through. So there was a case study section to the interview process. So there were sort of several interviews, including a case study specific element. It's probably not the best environment to go into the absolute minutiae of what that entailed. What I would say is, depending on the different areas of consulting that you're seeking to go into within EY, the nature of the case study would differ, and it's generally tailored towards the bit of the organization that you're entering. If people have got specific kind of tailored questions around case studies, particularly the prep, I'm more than happy to field it offline. So if people want to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd also say at the point I accepted my offer of a role at EY, I was through to the final round at Bain, and I'd been doing all the case study prep that was required for sort of that element with them. So that was actually very different to EY. It was a lot more intensive actually, and I had a mentor who was sitting within Bain who was helping me with that. So I'm more than happy. I never went to final round interview because I accepted my role at EY. But if anyone's got any questions on my own personal experience of applying to a Strat 3, I'm more than happy to share that as well. But again, I think it's probably best to do it offline where people have very specific questions. And like I said, I'm more than happy for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Kelly, would you be able to share your insights into the recruitment process that you went through?
Which Kelly?
Oh, Kelly Berman, sorry, whilst we're on consultancy.
So what was that, the recruitment process?
Yes.
Yeah, so I went for a job in KPMG in sort of February. The KPMG consultancy role closed down, but they kept my CV. So the guy he was an ex-military guy. He then got in touch with me in September to say a colleague of his in PA, they were recruiting. Would I be happy if he got in touch with me? I agreed. We had a chat, and then I was just sort of put through different partners. So the recruitment process I went through was more a case of they'd seen my CV, so they'd obviously seen something in my CV they liked. But after that, it was more, was I a good fit in terms of could they work with me, and equally could I work with them? So I spoke to the guy who eventually became my line manager, who is also ex-military, he's ex-Raw Signals, and two of the partners. And we didn't really chat so much about the job. It was more, we just chatted. But then once they thought, okay, she could be a good fit. After that, then I did a case study as well, which was specific to cybersecurity. And again, for example, with you, Hattie, you probably found the same. Yes, they're looking for a little bit of knowledge within your particular sector, which you can prep for. But I think more than anything, they're looking for, are you credible? Can you think? Can you adapt quickly in terms of if they ask you a tough question, are you going to try and bluff your way through it? Or are you able to just sort of talk around the situation, what you do know, and that you're going to go away and look at it? How do you respond to tough questions, but also what's your problem solving ability like, and can you talk to clients? I think that's more what they're looking for, is that problem solving ability rather than deep sector technical ability. And then once we'd done the case study, then we had one more chat, and then that was it. The offer of employment came through after that. So it was quite, once they see that you're a good fit and actually that you are credible in the way you talk and you match quite well to your CV, actually it's quite a quick process after that.
Brilliant. I can see we've got Grace and Katie both from BCG now. If you both wanted to introduce yourself. Katie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hopefully the audio is working now.
Yes, definitely.
Great, yeah. You would think after a year of this we'd have cracked it, but yes, I have got on another device now, so apologies for that. So I joined the Royal Air Force in 2009 after leaving university. I served for 5 years as an intelligence officer. I was stationed up at Lossiemouth doing stationing. I spent some time at Witten and completed an op-tour to Kandahar with the Herc Det. In 2014, I decided it was time to leave the military, and I went into management consulting. So that's when I joined BCG. I joined as a senior associate, obviously coming in with no commercial knowledge. I did engineering university, not a business degree. So I joined very much on the generalist track, quickly did a bit of everything that the London office had to offer. So I worked in I think all of our industries: financial services, pharmaceuticals, energy, retail, across a lot of different functions. So everything from strategy through organisation design, and sort of more operational project management type roles. I'm a consultant in the London office now, and sort of on the personal side, in the last 5 years, I've taken 3 lots of 1-year maternity leave. So I'm just coming to the end of the 3rd one of those now. So also happy to field questions about navigating that side of life, doing a consulting job.
Fantastic, thank you. And Grace?
Hi, yeah, I work in the London recruiting team. So I don't actually come from a military background, but I work very closely with our military network to try and support hires into the BCG office in London. So I'm very much here to answer any questions that you might have about the recruiting process, or any questions about CVs, just to give you any advice that I can.
Lovely, thank you both. Well, I suggest we start this question with either you, Grace, or you, Katie, just because it was sent in specifically for BCG. So are there any opportunities for flexible or part-time work? And linked to this, how has COVID had an impact on the way people are working in the office? Are you expected to be there 1, 2, 3 days a week, or are people still encouraged to work from home?
Yeah, happy to field that. So we have quite a few different options for flexible working. I've taken advantage of some of those myself. So I've done a model where I've been on 80% working 4 days a week. I believe we have other models available, sort of 60 and 70%. And then in addition to that, we have a program for taking a leave of absence. So I believe after you've been at the company for a year, you can apply to take a block of time off in Awana as well. In terms of how COVID has affected our ways of working, I mean, I think probably quite standard across professional services. As soon as lockdown happened, I went home with my laptop and I haven't been back to a client site since. We are slowly moving back to client sites, but I think that most of the consultants are still working remotely. And it'll be driven partly by client need, but I'd be fully expecting it to sort of remain hybrid, well, forever. Grace, I don't know if you've got anything to build on that.
Yeah, very much what Katie said. I mean, we are slowly starting to filter back to the office, but our main thing now is just everyone's still working from home unless they really have a business need to go back into the office. It's very much coming to the point where we're working from home is going to be a lot more common than it was before, as well as travel. I mean, we have a massive commitment to becoming net zero as well. So that, alongside how we've worked with COVID, working from home and less travel is going to become a lot more normal.
Thank you. So we had quite a few questions come in actually in the lead up to the event around finding your fit within the business and pitching yourself at the right level. So someone specifically said, I don't know which level to be pitching myself at. Does anyone have any advice for finding the right route in? Kelly Mullane, can we maybe start with you and then go to you, Lawrence?
Hi, well, obviously in financial services, sorry, my computers are all moving around at the moment, so hopefully I'm getting buzzed by different people, so different chat things are coming up. In financial services, there are obviously different rank structures. I was always after them to, I used to ask people, you know, what level are you? I soon realised that that's not actually the most appropriate question to ask. You know, I was desperate for people to wear their rank structure on their lapels, as we all used to do. I guess it's really contingent upon the kind of job that you want to do. If I was going to hire a project manager, I would expect to bring someone in with, I don't know, say, finger in the air, 5 to 10 years experience within the armed forces. I'd expect to bring you in as a second vice president level, which is, if you like, middle management kind of level. It really does depend on the kind of role that that you're interested in going for. I just want to reiterate one thing that someone said earlier on. I think it was Kelly. She mentioned that actually the interview process is a lot about getting that relationship going and finding the right fit. And I would absolutely agree with that. Certainly, it's mutual. You've got to feel comfortable, and they've got to feel comfortable with you. And 9 times out of 10, if you've got through to interview stage, there's something about your CV that they like, and there's something about you that sounds pretty good. So actually, that first initial interview is often just getting to know you and feeling you out a little bit. Are you going to be a good fit for this team? Are you the kind of person we want to work with? Because all the rest of the governance we can teach you. None of what any of us do is rocket science, right? There's absolutely, we're not, you're not going to come out of the military and become a brain surgeon overnight. What we do, it's not difficult. We can teach you everything that we do. I just want to have good people working for me. So that's one thing to bear in mind. But yeah, in terms of pitching at levels, I would say higher than your basic, somewhere in the middle, I guess, is the way I'd go for it. I wouldn't. It's difficult, I've interviewed colonels, brigadiers before, coming in for the, chief strategy officer role. They're not going to get it because they just don't have the same levels of experience as others. So just be aware of that. But I would say mid-management. I don't know what others feel.
Can I just jump in on that as well, from just to reiterate what Kelly's saying? It's not, you definitely don't undersell yourself, but also don't oversell yourself, because if you go in thinking, well, actually, I could probably do, a management, a certain level, you're going to be trying to run before you can walk, especially if you're trying to learn a whole new job, a whole new language, a whole new culture. So it's always best to sort of go in and trust the company you're going in for, because they're going to try and look after you, and they're not going to push you into situations you're not ready to handle, unless you're really saying that you can. So trust the company you're going for, have a chat with them, and trust that they're going to be offering you the right level and also the right type of salary. Also do your own homework and speak to other people within the same industry and work out roughly what you think you're equal to as well.
And Lawrence, within City, is there a clear rank structure and a specific level that you see ex-military people working well at? Oh, I think you're
yes. I think first of all, I really agree with what both Kellys were saying about finding your your middle ground there. I think from our side, it depends on what role you want to come in to do, how technical it is, and how many transferable skills you've got to bring over there. So I work on the trading floor, and I had to start again, much like I think Lizzie was saying. I didn't know anything about pricing FX or FX options, what have you. So I started again at the bottom and I've worked my way back up. Likewise, we've had people who have come into consultancy or security advisory roles within the bank, who have come in, let's say, post unit command. They've come in at sort of senior vice president, director level. But there's a huge number of transferable skills for that. Whereas, in mine, whilst there are lots of transferable skills in terms of, working under pressure, teamwork, I have had to train and relearn how to do a product. So I think thinking hard about the role you're going to do is very important. What I would say is we see this all the time. People get so caught up on their job title when they start at a place. They're like, oh, I couldn't possibly start as an analyst. I perhaps felt like that. And actually a year in, I was so grateful to have been able to restart, learn my trade before I had, a huge amount of responsibility, P&L, and having to worry about those sort of things. It goes back to, I think, what both of you were saying is trust in the organization you're going to, that you're going to go on the right career trajectory, and 2-3 years down the line you'll look back and think, what was I worried about? But if you go into the wrong role, you're basically setting yourself up to fail, and you could be out of a job before you know it. So yeah, I think don't get too pent up on what that starting title is, because it's all going to work out.
Thank you. And linked to that, does anyone have any experience of or advice for negotiating salary or negotiating package when you're securing that first role? Is there anyone who would like to take this one first?
I'm happy to jump in first. So I suppose this comes back to my point earlier around the importance of conversations, particularly conversations with friendly forces, with people who will be really frank and honest with you. I found contacts, and again, often within the military networks, to be really helpful in terms of negotiating the landmine that is salary conversations, because you really do want to have a kind of a basic start point that you're able to work from. So So I really used my contacts in order to gain a bit of an understanding about what I should be expecting. And then I had a bit of confidence within myself around what my negotiating position would be. Glassdoor is actually really helpful as well. But you can't beat a really candid conversation with somebody who's prepared to be frank and honest with you. And just be slightly cautious around this sometimes, because certain organizations are really funny about people having conversations around their salaries. I won't name any names, but when I was doing my resettlement, I had a conversation with a guy, ex-forces. This was in financial services, and we were in a coffee shop in London, and he was quite literally like looking around over his shoulder to check that people weren't listening. But he was nonetheless fairly, he was candid with me. So I think you just use your judgment, but this is the value of personal relationships and networks, to be able to get a bit of an insight in terms of what you should be expecting within that particular industry, and what your negotiating position is likely to be.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well, just to say as well, don't worry about getting it completely wrong as well. So they will offer you something that they think is fair in terms of what they see as your background. You've got time to go away and look at it and talk to us and say, do you think this is fair? But also you'll have an idea in your head of what you think you'd be happy to accept, which generally coming from the military is the bar set quite low anyway. But you'll have an idea of what you think you're worth in terms of moving across and what generally your rank will be, or your grade. But don't forget that once you're actually in the door as well and you're proving your worth, they will want to keep hold of you. And so there's generally a lower and an upper limit in terms of your particular grade. If you suddenly start running and you're doing extremely well within your grade, you can expect the bonuses to come in and promotion to come in very shortly after that anyway. So even if you do come in at a lower level than you were expecting, you'll probably catch up really quickly anyway when your worth starts to shine through later on.
And Grace, from a recruitment perspective, does what Hattie and Kelly have said line up with your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms for BCG, we have our set salaries that we offer for each level. And that's not just for, and it doesn't vary whether you come from a military background, a doctor background, a consulting background, they're the exact same for everyone who will be joining at that level. But exactly like Kelly said, if you're performing well, and you'll get the bonuses, you'll get the salary reviews. So it's not as though you're going to be set at that one and it differs from other people. You will very much get those sort of financial benefits sort of moving forward in the company. And exactly like Kelly said, if you're performing well, the company will want to keep you. So therefore they will do all of that. And then once you move to the next grading, you'll get into the next salary bracket. So yeah, it's very similar to experiences to everyone else.
Brilliant. So we had a couple of questions come in around personal development. So not only training courses, but actually promotion once you're in role. Lizzie, what's your experience within BlackRock? Are they encouraging you to go on training courses? Are they paying for them? Would you have any advice for people who are trying to choose which courses are best suited to them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's very role dependent. So, for example, the exam that I sat before I got my job, the investment management certificate, that's kind of an entry level exam and relevant to people who are in investment teams and also relevant to people in client facing and sales teams. And yes, BlackRock will pay for that. So that not only do they pay for the exam, but they also pay for the course. Unfortunately, you need to pay for it up front. And then once you've got your certificate, you can get that, you can claim that back. And then, yeah, as well as other exams that you would want to look at as well, they do really encourage it. I also sat another exam before I started, the CFA level 1, which was like 300 hours of work before I started, and I had all the best intentions of sitting the next 2 levels whilst I was in my job. But essentially, when I was in the internship, my main focus really was getting myself a job, rather than leaving work early to go and study for that. So yeah, I haven't got around to it yet, which I'm slightly embarrassed to say. But certainly within my team, there's a broad range of people who've done CFA, people doing CISI, other kind of like also degree level stuff. But yeah, BlackRock's really, really supportive. we have an unlimited leave policy, so we don't have a set number of days, which means that you can take advantage of 10 days study leave. That's not going to eat into any holiday leave that you want. So yeah, absolutely. If you've got the time and you've got the capacity, then yeah, definitely supported.
Fantastic. And linked to that, I know you mentioned a couple of qualifications earlier, Lizzie, but does anybody else have any either courses or qualifications that they would recommend people doing, especially if you have no commercial or civilian experience already?
I can jump on from a BCG perspective. We don't have expectations for people to do any kind of pre-employment courses or training. We recruit people who we think can learn the job on the job. And so when people join, there are dedicated blocks of training. So for a couple of weeks when you join, and then there's an ongoing learning and development program that you plug into throughout your entire career. But you're certainly not expected to do any kind of business 101 before you join. BCG does also offer sponsorship for MBAs that anyone can apply for. I think we had an ex-Marine who went off to get his in America a couple of years ago, so that was quite cool. And yeah, so there are a few opportunities like that as well to completely take time away from work, go and get some further education and come back.
And
I would just add from banking, we get a lot of questions about this, particularly people asking, do you need MBAs, do you need anything like that? And the answer is absolutely not. I really agree with what Katie just said. There's not a expectation that you're going to know your trade when you get here. So in my view, when we see guys and girls do well at interview who have got a qualification, it's really there to give them confidence in interview. So doing a relevant qualification of finance, like the investment management certificate, just gives people a little bit of confidence when they get to interview to talk about finance, because let's face it, it's a really confusing subject. But you don't need to go nuts and go and get yourself a CFA level 1 and spend a lot of money doing it, because ultimately if you need that qualification for your job, Citi or JP or BlackRock, whatever, they'll pay for that. So I would say if you're going to do a qualification, do something that's covered by enhanced learning credits, and it is something that's going to help you at interview by just making you more confident.
Ellie, Melaine, I see you nodding away. Do you completely agree with Lawrence, or is there any other courses you would
kind of? I'm going to be a bit different. I'm going to be a bit different. I think it's because maybe I'm just that bit older. But I think I came out the army and used my enhanced learning credits to get my MBA, and I can't tell you how many doors that opened for me. So I did it through the Open University. I did my first 3 modules while I was serving, and then I carried on doing the modules. And at the time, Barclays Capital helped and sponsored that MBA as well. So what I would say is, if you are interested in doing an MBA, then look at different ways of doing it. But certainly firms are really pleased for their teams to do MBAs, and like I said, I think it helped open doors for me. So I would say, and it gives you that kind of broader context in terms of business. I have no business experience, so for me it was invaluable to do that.
Can I just jump in on there as well, just what Kelly was saying? If you are thinking about doing an MBA, there's a great charity called Heropreneurs. Anybody thinking about doing an MBA, apply through Heropreneurs, and a lot of military people are able to get a 50% discount through the Warwick Business School, which is a fantastic MBA, and that's what I've just started with. So Heropreneurs is a military charity looking to support people to do MBAs.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think before we come on to kind of closing comments and your final top tips, Lizzie recommended one book earlier, but I wondered whether anybody else had any recommended reading material or podcasts or magazines that you would really encourage people to start looking at whilst they're looking at financial services or consultancy.
I think for finance, I would recommend people listen to all the podcasts that The Economist do. They do really nice, simple weekly podcasts on the markets and financial topics. I don't think it's necessary to go and get yourself a Financial Times subscription that costs a load of money. There's lots of weekly periodicals that you can get that gives you everything. But I listen to the podcast still now on the train into work, so they're a good starting point.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I think that's all of the questions. I'll just give the audience just one more minute to see if there's anything left to ask, but I wondered whether we could go round each of our panelists just for their kind of closing comments, thoughts, or a top tip or something to avoid or a key learning, just to close the session off nicely today. So I'm putting you all on the spot, I apologise, but there's been such fantastic insights. It would be great to end on a final note from each of you. So Kelly, Melaine, can I start with you, please?
You're picking on me now. Yeah, of course. Okay, so my thing not to do is don't ask people their rank when you first joined a civilian firm. They don't get it and they don't understand why you're asking. And I know you're asking because you want to see where you fit in the organisation, but it doesn't go down so well. My biggest piece of advice would be have a go. Have a look out there. You know, if there's something that catches your eye that you think you can do, even if there's 50% of the stuff that on the job description that you think, I could probably have a go. Have a go. You're going to come in, and once you get into the interview, like I say, you know, you're going to wow them with your experience. I love interviewing ex-military teams. We sit there and, like everyone says, we have a chat. And if I like you, then I'm going to put you forward for further interviews. And you know, so just have a go. And don't worry if the first role you get isn't the right role for you. You can see by my career, you don't just stay in one place. There are so many opportunities out there for you. So yeah, best of luck.
Excellent, thank you. And let's go to Kelly Berman.
I'd say the best bit of advice I could have given myself a year ago is not to stress. I think I was panicking that I wasn't going to get anything, and I didn't know what I was right for, and I didn't know what was right for me. Is just put your CV out there, see what comes back, and then once you actually start talking to people, you'll realize whether you're a fit for them and they're a fit for you. Not necessarily if it's the right skill set or whatever, it's the fit that's most important.
Thank you. Grace, can we come to you?
Yeah, so I'd say definitely don't underestimate your experiences that you've got. They're really strong and they do relate to businesses. Even if you don't have experience in that particular sector, you will still bring something to the table, and we will very much want to see that. Sort of reiterating what other people said is an interview, if you do get to the interview, it's very much you seeing if you want to work at that company. So not only are they interviewing you, you are essentially interviewing them to make sure that you actually want to work at that workplace.
Fantastic advice. Lizzie, we'll come to you next.
So my advice really is probably relevant to people that are applying to internships rather than direct hire roles, but a little bit with what Kelly said at the start, you know, don't get too hung up on that first job. You know, internships are such a great opportunity to get your foot in the door, and then once you're into these organizations, you can then kind of network and you know, learn what else there is in there to see what you want to do. So just an example, 10 people joined on my internship. I think one left at the end of 6 months because he was offered a job at Morgan Stanley. And then there's probably 4 of us that are in the same role we started. And the other 5 are in BlackRock, but in completely different business areas that they've worked their way into. So yeah, you know, if you like the business, but you're not all that sure on the role, don't let that put you off.
Brilliant, thank you. Katie.
Yeah, I think I would reiterate, don't sort of worry about spending time thinking about building up necessarily commercial knowledge or technical knowledge before you come in for interview. I think everyone on this call can think about times when they've really had to take ownership and show leadership, get things done under pressure. Everyone on this call can plan, but also think on their feet and adapt when things don't quite go to plan. Everyone on this call knows how to speak to people, how to influence sometimes quite senior people. And those are all such important skills in consulting. So think about times when you've used those skills, get really specific in your mind about when you've used those. And that would be the best way, I think, to prepare for interview.
Brilliant, thank you. Lawrence, we'll come to you.
Thanks, Esme. So 2 from me. I think 1, do as many inside events as your degree allows. They cost you nothing, and you've got everything to gain from them. Just go nuts and apply to every inside event you can do. And second of all, specifically if you're applying for a military program that's likely to be managed by military people, I would suggest not to demilitarize your CV too much. We get CVs through that have been so demilitarized, we can't work out what they did in the military, and it makes no sense to our colleagues in HR, and we're sort of stuck. So think about, are you applying to a military program? Will someone in the military read my CV? If so, tell them what you did in the military, because it might be really impressive. If you're going through a fully lateral hire where someone in civilian person HR is going to read it, then by all means, like, try and make it as civilian friendly as you can.
Excellent advice, thank you. And last but definitely not least, we'll come to you, Hattie.
Thank you. So just to reiterate the point, use your networks, really leverage the fact that you've got access to a great ex-military or military community that's operating across all these different industries. I think that goes hand in hand with Lawrence's point about do as many of these events as possible. But what I would say, treat every conversation like a potential opportunity, you know, whether it's a coffee, a glass of wine, a phone call, it could lead to something. So take it seriously, even if it feels really informal. Like Kelly Mullane said, somebody likes you, and if you come across well, chances are they might know somebody, even if they can't directly help out themselves, they'll know somebody who can, and they'll be willing to make an introduction. In line with that, my other major top tip, and I always tell this to people when I speak to people who are just starting out, is get your elevator pitch in a really good place. So, you know, if you've got a couple of minutes or, you know, 1 minute just to tell people what it is about you, that's great. Just have that and kind of keep practicing that, because again, every conversation or chat you have, that's an opportunity to present that pitch about yourself. And I would also say, in line with that, just keep working on your CV and have a sort of version of your CV that's ready to go, because again, every one of these conversations or these coffees or glasses of wine could potentially lead to something. And if you've got a CV that's ready to go, that can kind of help out with getting that process hastened along, then that's great. But obviously, back to the point that we've had previously in the conversations today, make sure that you're tailoring your CV. When it comes to actually submitting CVs for roles, it's got to be tailored to the opportunity. So that's really important.
Excellent, thank you. I can see all your fellow presenters nodding away, all in agreement. So that's been absolutely excellent. Thank you to everybody for all of your insights today, for answering all of the questions, and to our sponsors as well. As I mentioned earlier, as a charity, the OA, we can't and we wouldn't be able to run events like this if we didn't have sponsors and supporters like all of you today. So it's always much appreciated. And also thank you to Victoria. So you people in the audience, you don't see or hear from Victoria, but she's our event coordinator at the OA and seamlessly manages all of the tech for us today. So thank you, Victoria. So thanks all. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day and join us at some of our future events.